For two of us, this will be a little bit of a redo, but that's okay. Oh, go ahead, Director. Welcome.
Okay.
Glad to have you. And once you go ahead, I think on that, we're interested in hearing about what's going on with the liquor division and how some of where we are. Some of that you did yesterday, but most of the folks here weren't with us yesterday. So
Certainly.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for having us here and allowing us to speak on this issue. I'm Dan Noble. I'm the Director of the Department of Revenue, and with me today is Nicole Novotny Smith. She is the Administrator of the Liquor Division. The focus of this topic, obviously, is the transition that has been made not only with COVID, but also with a new system coming on board. I think probably a good place to start is to talk about some of the challenges that we faced from a staffing perspective. And we faced this even prior to COVID, but COVID has offered everybody some surprises. And one of them was, I don't think any of us expected the sale of liquor to did what it did during COVID. In the last year, our sales have increased 14.6%. We're on pace to exceed 140 million in sales. And that is by far the most we've ever produced for the state. That is up 36.2% from 2013. Our staffing levels up to that point, up to this last year, we're at 40, the liquor division, 41, I think it's, we did gain one employee there. But we were at a point where we were struggling to get liquor out the door the day that it was ordered. And we went to the governor's office and requested help. I think you folks are aware of the fact that we added an additional 10 AWAC employees to the liquor division. Those employees, positions have been filled and they are working in the warehouse. It has helped us a great deal. We also received funding to increase our temporary services contract with Express employees. And we have been changing a number of things in the way that we operated to try to deal with this increase and with some of the other changes that occurred. Probably the biggest issue we faced was not having staffing at the right times. And we now have 3 separate shifts. We start receiving product at 3 a.m. in the morning. We also start a 3 a.m. shift to start picking bottles, individual bottles. We also have a shift that comes in at 8 o'clock, works until 5. And then we have an evening shift that works until 9 p.m. at night. And we have, since implementing those changes, have missed, I believe, on 2 occasions, and those were days right after a holiday where we didn't get everything out. We've had, obviously, we can't depend on the weather, and there were some problems when we had the 31 inches of snow here. But beyond that, I think orders have been timely, and I think we have actually turned the corner on one of the biggest issues we faced, and that was special orders. We went from, in 2013, shipping out 13,000 special orders to where we're now at over 60,000 in special orders. Special orders are items that we don't normally carry in our inventory, so each and every case is managed manually by us through our system and through our suppliers. As the cases come in, there's a very manual process in getting them ready for shipping. And up until I would say within the last month, we were as much as 90 days behind on getting product out of the warehouse. We had roughly 110 pallets sitting on racks waiting to be shipped. As of this last month, we are current. We are, the day that a product is received in the warehouse on a special order, it is now put on the shelf and getting ready to be shipped at that point. So we have turned the corner as it relates to special orders. We feel comfortable with that aspect of it. The other major issue that we faced when we came on board was a new system. We went to a new system on September 21st, and it was not at all ideal. There have been major challenges in invoicing, in shipping. There were problems in orders, our online order system, and the transition was not anything but smooth. It was really rocky, and I come here to apologize to you today because, quite frankly, it was not at all what we expected, and it has been troublesome. What I can tell you is that since that time frame, a number of the issues have been resolved. Invoicing is no longer the issue that it was. We've stabilized that aspect of it. Invoices are going out. Bills are being paid on a timely fashion. The remaining hurdle that we have is the order entry system, and it has perplexed us. It is not stable. Now, it doesn't mean it's not being used. We have processed 35,000 orders using this online order system since we went live with it. But we're not happy with it. Our customers are not happy with it, and we're looking at alternatives to deal with that as we speak. So we have issued an RFP for review by the Enterprise Technology Services, and we're waiting on completion of that. We will look to issuing the RFP and then getting a developer on board and rewriting the order entry system so that we have a good product for our customers. That is the one piece of the process that is still troubling to us, and I want to make sure everyone understands that we are addressing the issue, but that is a component that not only affects our customers, but it affects our own staff because it has them doing things that they wouldn't normally have to be doing, and it's important that we get a resolve. The system itself, as it relates to picking orders and getting it out the door, is now up and running in a fashion that we're happy with. It's just the fact that we've got to get this order processing issue taken care of, and we're working to make that happen. One of the things that I think is important for people to understand is what COVID has done to our industry in general, and that is kind of trying to segregate the things that we can control. The system issues are ours. We own them, and quite frankly, we need to get them fixed. But there are things that were created by COVID that are problematic for our industry in general. This report is an out-of-stock report. It has 210 items on it, and that 210 items represents 8.6% of our listed inventory. Before COVID, we were running far less than 1% in out of stocks. And this represents, all the cases that have been ordered represents about 20,000 cases of product that we're out of stock on, that have been ordered and we're awaiting shipment on. But we're out of stock at this point, which means if I can't get it, we can't get it to the retailers. And I think that's something that people need to understand, is that this is not something that was generated by the liquor division or by our staff. It is a supply chain issue. It's every bit as big a problem as it was when you went down the paper aisle and saw nothing on the shelves. It's really what we're seeing. And I want people to be aware of that. We have to separate the things that we can control from the things that are just systemic and based on what has happened with COVID itself. And the supply chain issues that we've heard from our vendors are everything from not having access to shipping because of COVID-related issues. One of the things that is somewhat novel to the industry is that they're having trouble getting glass for certain sizes of product. So there's a number of issues that we're facing that trickles down from the supplier all the way to the retailer and to the consumer in general. That being said, even with 8% out of stocks, we are shipping more product than we ever have. 141 million is by far more than we've ever done before. It means more profit to the state. It obviously means that there's issues in who's getting it. And when you look at bars and restaurants, they were running at maybe 25% capacity. So this obviously impacted retail liquor stores more than anything. That's where most of these sales are going. It's caught us by surprise. I think it caught the industry by surprise. When you're looking at brown spirits, you've got to figure something out 5 to 10 years, depending on when you can actually have the inventory available. And there's only a certain amount of it that can be shipped at any given time. So brown spirits, bourbons, whiskeys, things like that have been a big problem. Allocation product, our largest seller, for a while we were out of stock. And fortunately, with Frontier Days coming back this year, we actually have the supply that we think we'll need to get through that. But it's just amazing the challenges that have been faced by COVID for everybody. But I wanted you to understand that there are certain things which are related to this system and all of the things that you've heard about the system. And there are certain things that have nothing to do with the system. And out of stock inventory and things from the shippers are something that we can't control. It isn't like we haven't ordered the product, but we can't get it in the door. That being said, we're getting as much in as we possibly can, and believe me, it is going out quickly at this point. I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else that pretty much describes the issues associated with personnel and then with the system itself. And we'll certainly stand for any questions you have. Cole probably has a little more in-depth knowledge of the things that have been going on out there, and she can certainly help answer any questions that you may have. We'll certainly stand for any questions you have at this time.
Okay, thank you. Members of questions for the folks from revenue. Go ahead. I'm just going to check over here because I always call on you first. Representative Larson. I've seen if anybody over here, but no one beat you to the punch. So go ahead, Representative Larson.
Thank you. Director Noble, when you talk about replacing that ordering system back with e-liquor, something similar to e-liquor, what I didn't understand is, so you're currently with the Encompass software products and DSD Link. And so would you get rid of the Encompass contract altogether, or would it just be the DSD Link, or which?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I think we'll get rid of the parts of it that aren't working currently. And we're going to try to do that as quickly as we possibly can, because quite frankly, it's not acceptable the way it's working right now. It isn't that they can't order product, but the fact is there are certain aspects of this that are not stable, and I'm not comfortable with it at all. The vendor that we're looking at doing this is the person that wrote the original e-liquor platform. And there are some differences. Number one, the system that we're on right now with Encompass is a cloud-based system. It's part of Amazon Web Services and their database, their data centers. And so it's a different environment that he'll be writing the program in. It isn't that he hasn't done it before, but it is something that he will have to work with Encompass in order to get this product up and stood up and going. And he's fully aware of it. He's already been in conversations with Encompass. But in order to deal with this, we want to put it out for RFP. We may again, look at asking for a bid waiver, because quite frankly, this is the system that our customers are familiar with. It's one they want, because it's what they've used all along, and it is a system that we would have to do minimal training on, because quite frankly, I think that's part of the issue with DSD Link, is that there are some training issues out there as well with it. But it is, the idea would be to keep Encompass, at least in the short term. We have another year on that contract, and then move to e-liquor as the order entry system. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop pushing to get DSD Link more stable during that time frame, because this isn't going to happen in a vacuum. It's going to take probably 6 months to a year to get DSD Link, to get e-liquor up and running. It will take some time.
Well, so I thank you. And Director Noble, you know, I remember the conversation that eCompass was here close by, and that we felt really comfortable, and I understand that failed, but I get really uncomfortable when we're already having conversations and pointing the direction that this is the one person we want to have the contract moving forward, and want to have a bid waiver do that. Just, does that cause you any concern?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, it causes me a great deal of concern. But the longer that I wait to get this process out, the more difficult it is going to be to our customers, and that's the concern I have right now. Will we probably end up issuing an RFP and having this go to interested parties? Probably so. But we got to recognize that time is of the essence here, and we have to weigh both of those, and that's really why I'm concerned about it at this point. December. Mr. Chairman, I believe it was in December. It was after we got enough AWAC employees on board to make that happen. You know, we had actually done, even before that, we actually started receiving at 3 a.m. even earlier than that, because we felt like we needed to get product off of the dock and into the bins, our picking bins, so that we would have more room to get staging product that was going out the door. You know, any orders that were being processed. If you get a huge amount of product in the door and you just leave it there, we really limit the amount of space that our people have to pick orders. So the idea was to have those not only received, but also put away prior to people coming in.
And when you meant December 2020, I'm assuming.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Yes.
Then the other question, I mean, have you looked at your accounts payable age? Have you looked at those? We've had some reports that, you know, one of the reasons that some outages have been because they're for non-payment. Do you know what the aging of your accounts payable are?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding that we are meeting not only the statutory guideline, which is 45 days, but we're actually under 30 now on virtually everything. Now, one of the things that you got to understand about the process is that there are always disputes as it relates to accounts payable. You'll have people drop off product and it's shorted, and we'll sit there and say, we don't have this product in the warehouse, and we'll take pictures of it, send it to the vendor, and that causes delays in payment, but it isn't associated with us not getting, it's waiting for a dispute to be resolved. We actually had some product from August that took us until the first part of this year to deal with. And I think it was a minimal amount of cases, but we had never received it in the warehouse. We sent them the documentation, and it sat us going back and forth on this issue for months, and it finally got resolved. But that's a normal aspect of the business that we do, and it was happening long before the system. It's not a system related issue.
That's a normal aspect of any business. So I get that. So, all right, thank you. Have you gone back and looked at have you done anything to look at, see if you have an invoice error rate either on invoice, the invoice product without, where there've been shipped product without being invoiced, or they've been invoiced without having received product. Have you done any kind of error rate to figure out on your invoicing what that error rate is, or do you have any idea? Just
It's my understanding, okay, when we first went live with this, there was a lot of it. There were, what we were doing was we were actually having our warehouse staff go through them and look for invoices that just didn't make any sense. Things that were where there was a special handling fee that was being assessed on something when there was no product going out, things like that. And they were pulling those routinely. That is no longer the case because invoicing is now it's stable pretty much. You're always going to have a one-off as it relates to a system not expecting something. And we had that in even before, but invoicing, to my understanding, and this is, I just had a meeting at 9 o'clock with the accounting staff. Invoicing is no longer the issue that it once was. The system is now invoicing correctly. We have made some changes in order to try to make sure to minimize that. And one of those was how we were handling special handling fees and additional freight charges. We basically went with what the system allowed, and it's now working fine. But initially, it was a huge problem.
Okay. Nice to know we're moving in the right direction. So then, looking at the contract. So the contract was for 24 months of subscription and hosting. So when did that 24 months start?
September 21st of last year.
Of 2020? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so as we, looking down that, so we've got the warehouse management solution. Is that in effect, and is that working appropriately?
With the exception, and one aspect of that subscription is DSD Link. That's the order system, and we're not happy with that. That doesn't mean it's not working, but it is not stable, and we're not happy with the performance.
Okay.
And neither are our customers.
Okay. And so the financial part of the financial segment of that is working okay. The Encompass financial part. So then you get down to the Encompass. They had the Encompass voice pick. Is that part of the ordering system? That was the part that actually that was the deficiency in the old system that kind of generated this whole thing. So is it the voice pick part of this is not working correctly?
Mr. Chairman, the reason that we went to this system was because the old voice pick system we had, which was Datria, was purchased by Honeywell and was no longer going to be supported. As a matter of fact, September 30th of last year, right before we went live, was the deadline for the maintenance associated with it. So we went live, kind of boxed into a corner to do that anyway. Originally, we were going to go live in April. COVID hit, and that just wasn't going to happen. So this is the earliest we could get it done and still have active maintenance associated with the old voice pick system. The new voice pick system has never been a problem. The issue has been associated with allocations and things like that. The things that we didn't understand going forward, things we weren't, the system wasn't behaving properly as it related to setting load sheets, and these are kind of technical terms, but setting load sheets and things like that. Those have all been addressed, but it wasn't part of the voice pick system. The voice pick system that we're on is a product of Encompass as well. It's part of the subscription. And that part is functioning fine. We just met with the warehouse manager this morning, and he's fine with its performance.
So is it the online ordering? Is that the problem?
The online ordering. When our customers go out and they say, I want to order 10 cases of Jack Daniels and 5 cases of Crown Royal, they put that order in. The system is processed immediately into the Encompass system, okay, and then it is set up on a load sheet to go out on a specific date for that particular customer and that truck. And then the system sends the order picker to the location, okay, and you'll have Jack Daniels in a specific bin, and it'll send them and it'll tell them which bin to go to. And what it does is our warehouse is set up so that what they do is they work from one end of the warehouse to the other, picking those orders, and the system directs them to the next pick location, so they don't backtrack again and have to do something again. They pick from one end of the warehouse to the other at the last pick location in the warehouse, and they go back and load it onto pallets for North Park trucking.
And yesterday you were talking about the fact that it's something in the system, when it happens, it glitches, you have to shut it down, you have to reboot, and it takes you several minutes, as I understood it. So what part of it is it? Is it the ordering system? Is it this pick system? What is it what is it that causes the system to collapse?
Mr. Chairman, what I was describing at that point was one of the issues we had with the old system.
With the old system.
With the Epicor system, we were running into issues where 2 or 3 times a day, it would freeze and all order picking would stop. The entire system had to be rebooted. They would reboot it and then the system would go back. So you're talking 15 minutes of downtime for an order picker who already is behind, and it makes it even worse.
Okay, so it comes down, so sorting back through all that from the last couple of days, listening to y'all. So the ordering system is part of the Encompass system, but that's also now the part that you want to replace that part of the system and go back to the e-liquor system. And so so the two things that then come to mind are, one, I mean, we've already paid for an ordering system that now we're going to go pay for a different one. And I'm trying to understand why we would do that instead of make sure that Encompass provides us a system that works or that it has the appropriate interface we're looking for. I mean, help us understand the reasoning there.
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the reasons for going to this is we want to make sure that we provide the level of customer service that we always have. And we're finding that while the Encompass system and the warehouse management system, the accounting piece of it, all of those things are working fine, the order entry system is not stable yet. Would I like to think that Encompass is going to fix that, and that the DSD link will eventually become as stable as e-liquor was? I'd love to think that, but I don't have an awful lot of time to make that happen. And what I'm trying to do is to work this from both ends. I'm still going to put pressure on Encompass to try to get this to work, but I also need to have a plan B in place should it never become the product that we want it to be. And yeah, I don't like the idea of having to go back for more money associated with this. But you also got to recognize that this system we're paying for with basically the same money that we were using for nothing more than maintenance on Epicor before.
And which, so I'm just about done with this, but I mean, when you go to if you go back to this, so what I heard today, and my concern is this, and maybe you can help Sage, I can't say that word, comfort me with respect to my concerns that, one, you've got an ordering system that's unstable. So now we're going to take that, which we would think would be most stable because it's part of the same people and part of the same overall system. Now we're going to introduce a completely different system. And so how do you migrate your data? How do you make the translation from the e-liquor over to the Encompass system so that it works into the pick system and the warehouse management system and all that? How does that get integrated in a way that we think would be more stable than the unstable one we have now?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I think one of the things that makes this probably palatable to everybody is the fact that e-liquor is something that all of our vendors were on, or our retailers were on for 15 years, I believe. Okay. They're familiar to it. They're familiar with the interface. They're familiar with how it orders, how they place orders on it. What will be the art in this is for the programmer that writes this to integrate with the Encompass system. And this gentleman that wrote e-liquor has already had meetings with Encompass, and they're talking about the points of integration that need to happen. There is no data transfer because it isn't a system that has data in it. It is a system that sends data to Encompass. So as a website, all it really is going to do is it's going to say, okay, I need to know what inventory is available. So it'll check the database, the warehouse management system to figure out what kind of product is out there. The customer places an order just like you would on Amazon, says, I want this product. That is then transmitted to Encompass. So the art in this is how that process.
Right, I mean, all your fields have to match up. That's the
Yes.
whole issue in the software. The fields all have to match up, and if they don't match up,
Correct.
we haven't, it'll still be unstable. So
Certainly.
I guess you guys are addressing that issue with the new software, the old software. And when we say it's unstable, does that mean that the system glitches and you have to reboot? Does that mean that orders are lost or data just disappears? It goes off into cyberspace? Never
Mr. Chairman, I believe that that's probably the biggest issue that we have right now is that people are placing orders on DSD Link. Those orders are transmitted to Encompass and they exist on Encompass, but they're supposed to maintain a record in DSD Link of the order that was actually just placed. And as my understanding is the customers are not seeing that. We have told the manager of DSD Link that this is happening and we need to have it fixed. But we've been told this before and it hasn't been fixed. And that's something that we're dealing with right now. I think my next visit will be to go down to Fort Collins and meet with the manager and say, look, this is a customer facing issue. We talked about the fact that customer facing issues are the first things that need to be addressed and it hasn't been. And we need to place pressure on them. One of the things I mentioned early on was that I'm going to work this from both ends at the same time. We're going to try to get DSD Link stable because quite frankly, it's not acceptable for us to go through the next year, even while there's another system being developed without progress made and getting a more stable system. We may not stay with it, but the fact is it still has to function. Now, I'm not saying that it's not functioning completely because there's been 35,000 orders placed on it, okay? It's just not acceptable to us and it's not acceptable to customers the way that it's functioning. We need to get it fixed.
I thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Representative Larson.
So Director Noble, what I hear you say, and I guess I want to ask again, do you feel comfortable with having a conversation with the vendors that you want to have their product and you're having them go out and meet with the existing Encompass, telling them what they want? And oh, by the way, we're going to do a bid. And how fair is that to others that maybe are going to be interested in that bid? Do you not see anything that seems a little, does that make you comfortable?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, at this point in time, with the progress that we've made with Encompass, I'm not terribly happy with the result. From the warehouse management perspective, I'm fine with it. But as it relates to the order entry thing, I am not fine with it at all. Now, will Encompass have to provide the same access to anybody that wants to put out an RFP? Yes, they'll have to. And the reason for that is because Encompass has to provide, and forgive me, I don't know what the term even means. I think it's points of contact between the two systems. Encompass is going to have to provide them with a listing of all of the APIs that they have to address. Any vendor that bids on this contract is going to have to contact them in order to know what that's going to look like. So all we're doing is saying our customers came to us and said, we want e-liquor back. Well, I would call it, we have to give everybody an equal shot to make that happen. And that's why I think that an RFP will be issued. The reason I bring the sole source option to you is because, quite frankly, we don't have an awful lot of time, and that will take time to get an RFP issued, give them plenty of time to have access to Encompass and to have access to the things that they need in order to give us an effective bid. And at the end of the day, the selection is going to be made based on who can provide us with the best product.
But Mr. Chairman, but who has had the most time to prepare for it? Yes, certainly, it certainly has to be the conversation with e-liquor.
Sure.
Nobody else even know that it exists. And so
That's,
we're going out and, you know, being from a bidding world where, geez, the more time I have to look and prepare, the better I am. And I don't think when you say that the process is equal, or do you think that that really is an equal in this whole process, is to be having a conversation with the vendor that you want to provide the system before it goes out to an RFP?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I believe that the person that has 15 years of experience on that particular system is always going to have a leg up. I get that. Okay. Now, they know that we're interested because we had to see if e-liquor can even be resurrected. So we talked to them because of that. But everybody on an RFP process is going to have equal access to the parties that we're going to deal with. And I would say that if, for that matter, DSD Link will have the ability to bid on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Noble, I'm curious, going back to the point in time at which the decision was made to consider a new system, what's been the level of coordination and participation with ETS?
Mr.
They have the business case.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwartz, I provided this to the Management Audit Committee yesterday, and this is, and I can certainly get a copy to you. This is the business case that was provided to the enterprise technology folks. Okay. It also has the bid waiver that was issued by procurement, and it has the contract and the statement of work associated with the entire process. And so there was contact with ETS early on with this. There was contact with procurement. There was contact with the AG's office. So this process went through what we were looking to do. The IT contract associated with this, and actually one of the staffers that is on our staff is an ETS employee as well. So we've walked through an awful lot of this process. Now, the reason that bid waiver was issued as opposed to going to an RFP for everything was because we were looking for a system that would avoid the problems that we've had in the past. Have a pick-to-voice vendor that ends up getting sold out, and now you're required to go to someone else. This system is totally integrated. It's all one piece. The DSD link, the order processing, the pick-to-voice system, it is all part of one contract. And that's why we chose to go with a sole source associated with it. Plus, you got 409 employees that you have access to, of which 100 are located 45 miles south. It made perfect sense to try to go down that path. I would say we endured a perfect storm. I had 3 retirements in a year. The project manager from our side that was going to handle this was an ETS employee. His name was Dave Corrali, and he was the person that was our project manager for both the excise tax system and the mineral tax system. Had a great deal of institutional knowledge, and he left within 9 months of us going live. His replacement lasted another month, and then she retired. And then my liquor administrator retired in August. Of course, part of that might have been COVID as well. But I mean, the thing is, we knew we had a deadline looming. September 30th, we were going to lose support for the pick-to-voice system. If the pick-to-voice system goes down, you're basically dead in the water. You can't do this process with as big a warehouse as we have and expect to be efficient in any way, shape, or form. So that's why we went with it. That's why we did the sole source. Obviously, it would have been much preferable to go to another vendor, but we would have been faced with one of the states that we dealt with was Vermont went with a product called D365. We would have been faced with getting a separate pick-to-voice system with that product. Another one called VIP, we investigated, same thing. We would have had to have a separate contract for pick-to-voice. And we just felt like, look, let's not create that problem again. And now we have 2 of the 3 pieces working well, the warehouse management and the pick-to-voice work fine. Now we've got an issue with DSD Link.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, Director Noble, just a couple of quick questions now,
Sure.
and because we are the Appropriations Committee, so I've been on this committee for 3 years. I don't remember when we appropriated the money to buy this software to do this new program. That's just a statement. I don't remember that. Maybe you can clarify that. But if we go into a process right now, you're going to do an RFP out for maybe another system. Where in your budget that you have today is that, or are you planning to bring a budget request to the committee in December when we start going through the agency budget? So there are really 3 parts to that. But, and do you have any anticipated idea what a program might cost in light of what the last one did?
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
Mr. Noble.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, I would say there was a request for the hardware associated with this. There was no need for a request for the software because it is already funded on an ongoing basis as part of a maintenance agreement and is really the exact same price as what we're paying for maintenance for the system that was already in place. So there was no additional funding required for it. That's one of the things that made it attractive, is the fact that we could actually get system updates on every other month. And I think that's one of the things that made this very attractive.
Or that's cost. What is the maintenance cost of this program right now on an annual basis?
Mr. Chairman, I believe, and I probably have to check just to make sure, but it seems like it was about $15,000 a month, I believe, is what we're paying for maintenance on the, that's what we paid on the Epicor system, and that's what the subscription is running right now.
All right, the rest of the other 2 questions. RFP, are you going
Okay.
to ask for additional funding?
Mr. Chairman, we've been asked by the governor to get a thing in place, a price in place, and try to B11 that money, because this is considered an emergency at this point. We've got to get this going. And that's one of the reasons we're here today, is to let you know what we're looking at doing to try to get this done. They want something in place as soon as we possibly can. If there's a mechanism whereby I can go through you folks for emergency funding, I will certainly come to you with that. But it is something that they want to have up and running as soon as we possibly can at this point. And that's what the directive that I've been given.
Just going back to the business case, I mean, the numbers were, it was about $205,800 to maintain the existing system, and that was the price that they had to do the new system. So those are just the numbers that you were at yesterday. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Any other questions? Did you have some Senator Guru, did you have questions?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Director Noble, Administrator Smith, how are you? Just a couple of questions. How many customers total does the Department of Liquor Division have?
Mr. Chairman, I think the numbers that I saw on the annual report last year it's in the neighborhood of 1,500 licensees, I believe, and that includes full retail liquor licenses, bar and grill licenses, and all of our restaurant licenses, that sort of thing.
Okay, so 1,500 license, if I can follow up.
Go ahead, ask your question.
In your letter dated June 3rd, since October 12th, 2020, 857 complaints were received and tracked by the commission. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, I believe it is, I believe it is true.
Thank you. You talked about and you gave this to us yesterday in management audit, and I think you can provide copies for this commission, this business case for the liquor division that was given to ETS. What was the response? I mean, did they prepare some sort of response to this that they turned in?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, are you talking about the business case that was provided? They issue, when they do their approval, they will issue a bid number, or I would call it a business case number, approval number. So yes, there is correspondence back from them. And then we use that business case number, I believe, in the bid waiver when we address that. It is referenced there.
I want to make sure I understand this now, and the committee want to make sure the committee understands this too, because it's something we've talked about. So what you got from ETS was a number that said this order. Okay, that's what you got. Okay, thank you. Let's see. In your letter, once again, October 3rd, or June 3rd, page 2, middle second paragraph, is decreasing. The problems are decreasing and retailers are more satisfied than they were last fall. Is that correct?
I would say anecdotally, yes.
I've been a part of a group that's been meeting with you since you went live in September. We've been meeting since last October or thereabouts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we've been through a lot of these issues. We've been talking.
We've been through these time and time again.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Any other questions? Any final comments, Director Noble?
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the things I want to point out is that I'm going to take full responsibility for what happened with this. This happened on my watch. It has not gone the way I would like it to go. I am very disappointed in the way that it went out. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it because, quite frankly, it's unacceptable the way it happened. It is not the way that we've been accustomed to in providing service to our customers in the past. And I am working my darndest, as is Nicole, as is the 51 employees out at the liquor division, to try to get this resolved for the customers for the state of Wyoming. I just hope that you will keep in mind that there are two issues here, okay? Some that we can solve and some that we can't. As long as we keep that in perspective, we'll certainly make sure that this system works for all the customers in the state of Wyoming. But there's some of this that is just nothing we can control. The orders, I'm embarrassed by the fact that 8.6% of what we offer is for sale we can't get. And the suppliers are embarrassed too, believe me. They can't get the products to us, and they're struggling with it as well. But for the system related issues, I apologize. This did not go the way I wanted it to, and we are working diligently to get it on track for you.
All right, thank you, Director. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thanks, Dan. So do you have a time frame of when you're going to either do the RFP or do a sole source?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I spoke with Tim Sheehan with ETS, and they are, I think they might have a few questions with us as it relates to the draft RFP, make sure that it's appropriate. And I think there's a meeting tomorrow with them. I'm supposed to get some level of response then. As soon as I get that from them, we will initiate the process for an RFP. I do know that there is some pressure to do a sole source, and I know what kind of angst that creates. I get it, believe me. I am the last person in the world that wants to go down that path. But I also recognize that I've got 1,500, and I think it's 1,594 customers that want a better system than they have today. And this piece of it is critical to them. So we're certainly going to be mindful of the fact that an RFP is a really good way to go with this. And I will, believe me, I understand the level of concern associated with doing that. But I also have to get this process moving. I know that I have probably a 6-month development cycle, if that's at the very least. So I want to get this done and get it out to people so that we can have the level of service we want them to have.
So have you had discussions with the gentleman who was going to help put together the e-liquor platform? And then discussions with the Encompass to see how those two will integrate together so that they can function in one component. And, you know, basically you'll have two entities you're going to have to deal with on a regular basis. So that just more complicating your contract provisions and those type of things, and continuing performance if one side doesn't function properly.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, that is correct. I think one of the things that you got to understand here is I do plan to continue working this from both ends at the same time. Okay. I am still going to go down to Encompass and put pressure on them to get this platform stable, regardless of where this ultimately ends up. We have to have a functional system for our people, our customers to order on, and I'm not at all happy with what it's doing today.
So I'm just curious, Dan, it sounds to me like it's been in place for what, 7 or 8 months?
Mr. Chairman, 8 months.
And it doesn't work properly. And if it doesn't work properly, why don't you end the contract, or why don't you negotiate? And how are you addressing it?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, it isn't that it doesn't work. It's not stable. Like I said, we have processed 35,000 orders on. Doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It does not work to our satisfaction. The problem that I have is I got to have an online order platform for these people to order on. I cannot have everybody calling in on the phone to place their orders. That just doesn't have, I mean, right now we have approximately 70% of the people that are ordering from us order online. To put that kind of pressure on people taking phone orders or fax orders is not workable anymore. It's just too much volume.
How did you get the anticipated cost of $500,000 for the e-liquor platform?
Mr. Chairman, that was the number provided to us by the gentleman that wrote the original e-liquor platform. He says this is what it would cost him to integrate it with the Encompass system. That is a ballpark number. He just looked at it and said, it looks to me like it'll take about that kind of money. That is not where the bid will end up, but it gave us a placeholder for what we're looking to make happen.
What are his ongoing costs then? Maintenance fees, updates? Mr.
Chairman, that included some maintenance for it, and I'm not sure what that is on an ongoing basis. Mr. Chairman, if Ms. Novotny Smith has some further information on that, I'll let her share that with you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman, Mr. Chairman. We initiated this inquiry because retailers wanted e-liquor back. And at the direction of a task force, the governor and Director Noble, we went back to the individual that did create the old e-liquor to get an estimate and an assessment of the project to determine if it was even feasible. And from that got the number of the 595. I believe that included an initial investment for 3 years of $20,000. It was a big estimate, $20,000 to $50,000 per year for security updates and maintenance. Again, this was a very big, broad estimate, not knowing the details of the project and fully anticipating the release of an RFP for e-liquor. Sadly, we cannot go back to the previous e-liquor that we own and hold. The vision being that this product will be something that we hold on to, not owned and subscribed to by a third party. We could not go back to that, sadly, because it was integrated fully with our previous system, Epicor. So a new build is needed. For security purposes, it's probably a good idea, but that's where the 595 came from. That whole number is inclusive of maintenance cost for 3 years, projected.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Godspeed on your fixing this. We'll go ahead and open this for public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to do a public comment with respect to the liquor division operations, or any public comment with respect to liquor division operations?
So, Mr. Co-Chair, I see some few folks here who may have some insight. I'd like to know what the real problems are and specific examples of what the problems are, other than what we've seen. So anyone want to educate us?
If you dare, go ahead. Why, did you lose the bet, Mike?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I should have worn my Groucho Marx glasses. Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. Yeah, this has been a train wreck. It's been an ordeal. I feel for this. There's been no winners. You've got 1,500 businesses that are relying on product through a pandemic. Yeah, we're selling more alcohol at packaged liquor stores, but if you can't get product, yes, and there are supply shortages, but it has been more acute in Wyoming. We know people in other states. Now, I salute the people of the liquor division. Among them, I feel the most sorry because they're putting out fires with a broken program when they should be loading product and getting it out to retailers. Mr. Noble and I have worked together for many years, for several decades. Admittedly, I don't think any of us knew it would be this bad. We had some degree of trepidation. As far as what I've heard from retailers, there's still invoicing problems. Is it as acute as it was at one time? I don't know, because a lot of people just gave up at complaining because, and the hours that these retailers have spent fixing things, checking their invoices, filing for shortages. Bear in mind that money's withdrawn out of your account immediately. Now, if you're wondering if anybody is having problems, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, go to your local packaged liquor store and ask them. And I think you'll hear. Now, bear in mind, in my position, I only hear from people usually when they're mad about something. And I would guess 25% of the fourth quarter of last year was spent trying to fix this. I guess the maddening part to some extent, and you know, like I said, these are my friends back here, but we had a spring board meeting for the WSLA, and I was going through our October board meeting minutes, and we were told by liquor division staff a month after the rollout of Encompass that special orders, invoicing, the whole thing would be fixed within 3 to 4 weeks. Well, it's not, and it's still not. I don't care if we P11 it. I don't care if we sole source it. I don't care what it takes, because retailers have not had a pleasant experience. And this has been a really tough time to not have pleasant experiences, because 2020 wasn't that pleasant anyway. And so I don't care what happens. I just want to get this fixed. It's been painful. It's been painful, my friends at the liquor division. Admittedly, the person who was key in making this choice retired a month and a half before it rolled out. Now, I don't know whether that says something or not, but I wish I could have retired a month and a half before it rolled out. There was no beta testing, as far as I know, in this program. Very little training provided to staff. That's not Mr. Noble's fault, because he wasn't there. And Ms. Novotny Smith started a month afterwards. So this has been heartbreaking, because I get retailers that, you can't get product in Cheyenne. Guess what? Your customer's going down south, and they found it there. And that's what's happening. Or direct to consumer, they give up and get it online, sometimes illegally. And so I hope that helps. I just, like I said, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm not throwing stones. I just want it to work. The idea of a retailer placing an order and have the thing DSD spin out of control, dump their order. They have no idea whether it was placed or not. One thing that has not been mentioned is the liquor division. And remember, I used to be a retailer. Liquor division prided itself until 8 months ago with next day delivery throughout the state of Wyoming. Well, it's now 2 days. The rollout of Encompass has affected things adversely enough that except for Cheyenne, most places are getting 2-day delivery instead of 1-day delivery that the good senator from Jackson knows we were getting next day delivery. Like I said, I don't care what it takes. Just help my people because this is not pleasant. And I thank the committee.
Do you have a question? Go ahead, Senator Guru.
Thanks. Mr. Mosher, and you just alluded to it. I just want to say it. We worked together on this for a long time, but up until the last 8 months, that you and I both consider that the Wyoming Liquor Division in America was the gold standard for moving alcohol, and for the 1,500 customers whose sole source of inventory is the Wyoming Liquor Division. And they were the gold standard for that, to be able to get that done. Is that not true?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, yes. Until 9 months ago, we were the poster child for how a control state would operate in the relationship with retailers in next day delivery, in pricing, in fair service. And all that, I mean, the trust level has changed dramatically. I think I've heard it say went from the gold standard to no standard. And please bear in mind, I'm not throwing stones at my friends at the liquor division. Most of them were handed this too. But yes, Senator, and the task force has been meeting since the end of November. And this is the first time I've seen an approach to changing the system rather than just hoping they tweak it enough to make it work.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Kinski.
Mr. Moser, at the outset of your comments, you said, yes, there have been product shortages, but we know people in other states, ... I didn't know what the rest of the statement was. I heard Mr. Noble say the problem was COVID-related shortages, but you referenced that and then said, but we know people in other states. What does that mean?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, sometimes ... is the most eloquent I get. Other states are having shortages, but we went through a period of time where retailers were only getting about 25 to 50% of what they ordered. Shortages in other states, we checked with 7 or 8 other states, I think 8. And the average shortages during that period were 10 to 30%. And so we were running well above any state we'd checked with. Part of it is because, like I said, they were so busy putting out fires. Not everything was being shipped, not everything was being inventoried. One of the difficulties with this program is it was impossible in some cases to know what inventory was on a product unless you called yourself. You couldn't check online. And so, yes, there were supply shortages. And yes, if our only problem were supply shortages, I wouldn't be here. But it's more acute than that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
Chairman. Thank you,
testimony.
committee.
Anybody else wishing, any other public comment on this issue? Any other public comment on this issue? Nobody in the online room? All right, we'll go ahead and close our public comment. The next item of business is item number 9, fire a pension. So we're going to start off with Polly Scott. Has, I think, some opening comments and some background for us, and we'll go to Mr. Swindell. I think most of you can read the agenda, and then I think Tom Chapman appearing by remotely, and then Mr. Crank is here representing some fire aid pension plan members, and also Mr. Doty. Is it Doty? Am I saying that correctly, Pat?
Mr. Chairman, you are saying it correctly, but Robbie tore part of his eye, so he won't be here.
Is someone else going to take his place?
No, just me. You're just stuck with me. So-
Well, you're a poor substitute for Mr. Doty, I'm sure, but we'll muddle through. Thank you, Pat. Okay, with that, Polly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, committee. Polly Scott, LSO Budget Fiscal Division. And to support the JAC's work on interim topic number 4, which is to evaluate alternatives and potential solutions on the soundness of the Fire A pension plan. You have in your materials a briefing paper dated May 2021. And I would like to share my screen, if that's all right. And just go ahead and put that up. If I can find it. Sorry, I just am having trouble finding it. Karen, maybe you can show it for me. That'd be all right. Thank you. Yeah, so online, the briefing paper is item 9-01. And it condenses into 4 pages a 40-year history of the pension system for professional firefighters in Wyoming, paid firefighters in Wyoming, from 1981 to the present. And although the firefighters' pension plan dates earlier than that, started all the way back in 1935, which is also the year the Social Security Act was passed. And Wyoming's firefighters do not participate in Social Security. Almost all other government employees in Wyoming do participate, but the firefighters don't. So the issue brief starts in 1981 when the legislature passed a reform of the firefighter pension plan to address an unfunded liability at that time of about $34.5 million. The reform transferred administration from the Workers' Compensation Division of the Department of Employment to the Wyoming Retirement System, commonly called WRS. And WRS administered what became known as Fire A and Fire B as 2 plans. And just as an aside, I'll step out of the history and mention that there's currently a legal action pending in Laramie County District Court that has to do with whether these are 2 plans or 1 plan. The 1981 legislation closed the membership of the original program only to firefighters hired before July 1 of 1981. And this became known as Fire A. And the benefits were maintained for that plan. Specifically, the benefits were 20 years of for 20 years of service was 50% of the current salary of a fireman first class. And then the reform legislation added an additional 1% for additional years beyond 20 with a cap of 60%. And I'll just mention that basing the benefit on the current salary, the retiree benefit on current salary, is something that became known as the escalator provision, thinking that when current employees received a salary increase, retirees would receive that salary increase as well. Firefighters hired on or after July 1 of 81 became part of what's known as Fire B.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Holly, could you pull that mic just a little bit?
Oh, I'm
closer?
sorry. Yes,
There you
yes.
go.
Which reminds me, for everybody, Karen reminded me that you have to speak into your microphone or at least turn it on. So that some people outside the room can hear. So anyway, check
Can
that
you hear
one
me
out
now?
for me, Karen. Go ahead,
Okay,
Polly.
thank you. Sorry about that. So firefighters hired on or after July 1 of 81 became known, part of what is known as Fire B. And that was designed to be more affordable with a reduced benefit structure. And it was not based on current salaries. The benefit was based on a percentage of each individual's final average compensation. And the formula for Fire B was set at 40% of final average compensation for 20 years of service, with additional amounts for years over 20 and a cap of 60%. The legislature took care of the unfunded obligations that they knew existed at that time through additional methods. They appropriated an additional amount of estimated to be 46.8 million by the Wyoming Retirement System over a 13-year period, as well as the contribution rate for Fire A in 1981 was set at 43.5% of salary. And the state picked up 22.5% of that, leaving the local government employers with 21%. The Fire A employees paid 8% of salary. And in addition, 50% of the gross annual tax from the fire insurance premiums were directed to the Fire A plan at that time. And for Fire B, and I will say that the summary is short on the Fire B history, but for Fire B in 81, the plan was initiated and the contributions started initially at 21% of salary for employers and 6% for employees. So the legislature's appropriations over 13 years backfilled the unfunded liabilities that were known to exist at that time, and they were deemed to be adequate in around 1996. In 97, the legislature made many changes to the Fire A plan, and that summary is kind of bulleted out in the middle of page 2 on the screen. In short, the legislature ceased all the contributions to the plan and increased the benefits for retirees. And this was based on recommendations and information at the time that was the best information available at the time from the Wyoming Retirement System and its actuaries. Fire A had a surplus, and it was determined that no additional contributions were necessary. Then again, in 2000 and 2001, the legislature increased benefits for Fire A, with the final result being for a 20-year benefit, it would be 75% of a fireman first class salary with an additional 1.5% for additional years beyond. And surviving spouse benefits were increased to 100% of the member's benefit. Around 2004, WRS expressed concern over funding for the Fire A, primarily the escalator provision was a concern. And this led to the legislature removing the escalator provision, which based the retiree salaries on current, or retiree benefits on current salaries. They replaced that with an annual compounded COLA of 3%. And that started in 2005, and that's been going on ever since. It's legislated that there will be an annual compounded COLA of 3%. Then in 2009, WRS submitted a briefing paper to the JAC reporting the long-term inadequacy of funding for Fire A, and particularly the 3% annual compounded COLA was highlighted. WRS requested a legislative solution based on either increasing contributions, reducing benefits, or a combination of both. And although WRS had the statutory authority to restart contributions, they did not see this as a solution because there were few active employees. And there was also a discrepancy in the employers between A and B, with 9 original employers. And Karen, if you could put up the handout from retirement, that shows the 9 original employers that existed in 1981 before the Fire B was created. And then there were 7 additional municipalities that joined and are part of, have only employees that are under Fire B. So in 2014, the JAC sponsored legislation that was designed to bring the Fire A to 100% funding over 10 years. And they did this, the strategy was to spread the cost among the retirees in the form of a reduced COLA, employers by having the employers pay a contribution that would be based on a proportional share of the retiree payroll, and the state also contributed in the form of lump sum payments. And I think around the bottom of page 3, the specific numbers are detailed out, but the retirees would accept under this legislation, which did not go all the way through, retirees would accept an annual 2.1% simple interest COLA in place of the 3% compounded annual COLA. The actuaries estimated that that would be worth almost $35 million over the member lifetimes. There were 2 payments from the state that totaled $38 million. And then the 9 original employers would be paying $11 million over a 10-year period. All that added up together was $84 million, and it was designed to address over 10 years a $68 million unfunded liability that was calculated at that time. The bill made it through the House, didn't make it through the Senate, and there's not been another attempt at legislation. FIRE funding has worsened over time, and it was characterized by the WRS actuary as being in severe peril with an anticipated failure date of 2025 with no assets being available at that time. WRS, the board, informed members and constituents, including legislators, of its intention to move assets of the FIRE to a fixed income investment strategy starting in January of this year to avoid market volatility. And shortly after that change in the investment strategy, a number of beneficiaries under FIRE filed a legal complaint that's currently in Laramie County District Court assigned to Judge Catherine Rogers. Appendix A of your report is an AG opinion taking the position that FIRE A and B are 2 separate plans. And the plaintiffs are requesting the court declare them one account and require that account to pay retirees of FIRE A and FIRE B. WRS has provided a study, which is attached as Appendix B, showing the results of combining FIRE A and FIRE B into one plan. And in short, the plan is estimated to run out of assets in 26 years without additional contributions. And if additional contributions were added, it would be in the magnitude of about 22% of salaries. WRS also has a spreadsheet tool which estimates the cost of different funding solutions for FIRE A on its own. I want to skip to table 1 of the report on page 4, which shows the average benefit paid to a FIRE A retiree. Karen, if we could put up table 1, thank you. It shows the average benefit of a paid to a FIRE A retiree in 2020 was almost $61,000 annually. And that includes the 3% annual compounded COLA since 2005. I was able to survey the 9 employers to get current salaries, and table 1 shows a comparison of what the FIRE A benefit would be under the prior benefit levels throughout the years. And the current salaries multiplied by the highest benefit level in 2001 would not result in retirement benefits as high as the average current benefit. The unfunded liability has increased over time. It was estimated at $68.1 million in 2014, and that was under an 8% return assumption. It was $132.7 million in 2020 under a 7% return assumption. And I should mention that the Wyoming Retirement System Board from time to time does change their return assumptions. And that's what you're seeing here. But then in 2021, the unfunded liability was estimated at almost $394 million, quite an increase from the year prior. And that's because a 1% rate of return assumption was used due to the shift to a pure fixed income investment strategy. If a 7% return were used for 2021, the unfunded liability was estimated at $139.1 million. As I said, the Wyoming Retirement System has been very proactive and provided a spreadsheet tool which estimates the cost of different funding solutions for Fire A on its own, not combining it with Fire B. And Director Swindell has brought it with him and is prepared to go more in depth with the JAC today if you would like to do that. And my final comment that I would like to share is just that any potential solutions that the JAC would like to consider do need a legal analysis so that any constitutional or legal implications could be thoroughly evaluated before putting that into legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Polly? Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, Paula, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed the memo. There's a lot of facts, a lot of details in there, a lot of analysis. Thank you. I have a question about if you know about how the current rules for beneficiaries work. So, for example, let's imagine I'm a firefighter, fire pension, fire plan A retiree. I'm 73 years old, right? And then I'm single, but then I get married to someone who's say 33 years old, right? And then I die immediately. Does my surviving spouse, does the widow then get to collect? And if so, how much? And does that person get to collect for their lifespan, which if they're 33, they live another 50 years?
Polly, if you know, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I have a pretty good idea of the answer to that question. And of course, we have Director Swindell here as well. But the firefighter A pension has a 100% surviving spouse benefit. So the surviving spouse, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, follow up.
And Mr. Chairman, and that if you know, are there any constitutional, contractual, or other limitations on what the legislature can do to change those benefits?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would probably.
You're free to phone a friend or just.
I would-
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are considerations there and perhaps Mr. Richards could chime in.
Go ahead.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Richards.
the LSO staffer who will be handling this, Josh Anderson, is away today on a family issue. So that was essentially the point that Polly raised at the end of her analysis, that any proposed legislation, including modifications to benefits or whatnot, would need his input.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. When you went through the discussion about the history of the bailout, you gave us a few more figures than I'm following here in your memo, and I wonder if you might just follow up very briefly. You talked about an appropriation of so many millions of dollars, and then a like amount, I think, came from from local governments. And I was under the impression there had been an appropriation sometime in the 90s as well. As if you could just, we don't need to belabor it now, but if you could just give me a little bit more detail on those, who's paid how much over the years, I'd appreciate it.
Can you do that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, certainly I can. Basically, the legislature continued to make pretty much biennial appropriations for 13 years, totaling up to about $46.8 million between 1981 and 1996, as well as then they were contributing over half of the legislated employer contribution amount.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So, and then on top of that came the gross annual tax on the fire insurance premium in addition.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to see what those flows were overall, just a brief table if you could. And then, Mr. Chairman, one more follow-up question. With respect to Representative Stith's question, does the surviving spouse not only receive 100%, does the surviving spouse receive escalators as well as would her spouse during his or her lifetime?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Kinski, the escalator provision went away. And so now benefits are every year increased by 3%.
So she gets, the surviving spouse gets the COLA Doesn't get the escalator,
But gets the
but it's a
COLA.
COLA.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions for Polly? Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Thank you.
Anything, any other final thing, anything you forgot to say that you wish you had said?
Thank you for this opportunity and I know there are a lot of people here who are very interested in the results of this. So thank you for the opportunity. Also, if you would like to see the spreadsheet that Mr. Swindell has, we have that available.
Okay,
One more quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
sure, go ahead.
In paragraph 4, page 1, you said, as of January 1, 2021, Fire A had 197 retirees, 67 beneficiaries, and you may have touched on this. What's the difference between a retiree and a beneficiary? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Kisti. A retiree would be the employee who retired and the beneficiary would be a surviving spouse.
So, Mr. Chairman, the total number of people drawing would be 197 plus 67.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Polly.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Swindell.
Mr. Chairman, I'm David Swindell, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Retirement System. I'm joined by Ben Brandis, our General Counsel. Also online is our Chairman of the Wyoming Retirement Board, Tom Chapman. With your permission, we'd like to switch the order a little bit. Tom would like to make some introductory remarks, and then I would like to speak.
If it was any better than Tom, we'd say no, but we'll go ahead. So Tom, go
Thank you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I am Tom Chapman. I'm Chair of the Wyoming Retirement System. Thank you, Polly, for that great summary, and we do miss you at WRS. I know we're here to discuss Fire A and potential solutions, but I wanted to take a quick minute just to update our home committee a bit on what's happening with the pension. Fire A doesn't really represent what is going on with the pension. And the overall health of the system. We've hit 2 really big milestones this year. One, our defined benefit plan is now over $10 billion, and our 457 plan is now over $1 billion. Again, I give a shout out to Polly Scott for that. Our large public employee plan is now close to 75% funded on an actuarial basis and projected to be 100% funded in 25 years. The funding status and projections have all improved. And so why is that? Our investment returns have been extremely good. Our 2020 investment returns were over 11%, 400 basis points higher than our 7% target. Just to give you some perspective, back in March of 2015, our 5-year returns were in the 82nd percentile. Today, as of March, our 5-year returns are in the top 3rd percentile, 32nd ranked. That's a 10.25% average return for those 5 years. One of the reasons for this is really thanks to you all. We've now got a much more stable investment staff. We've been able to hire better folks thanks to our performance comp and hold people. We've also had great leadership from whether it was Ruth Ryerson, which was our previous executive director, to our current ED, who I know is very modest, but given this pandemic at COVID, with all of the turnovers with our staff, the senior leadership team has done a fantastic job with the pension. We've also listened to you all. One of the concerns was not having enough investment folks on our board. We just had a major turnover on our board where we've had four new slots. And I want to thank Governor Gordon. He's appointed some really great folks. We have now 3 great investment in expertise folks. And one of them was the deputy CIO of $1 trillion plan in the Middle East. Another one was the CFO of a reinsurance publicly traded company that I think knows more about actuarial studies than our actuarial consultants. So we feel like we're in very good shape. On Fire A, as Polly mentioned, the clock is ticking. This is not a new issue. I know clearly we worked hard in 2014 to try to resolve this. Within the WRS meetings, we certainly, I think, talk about it just about every legislative and benefit meeting that we have. We know that this financial decline is accelerating. One of the points I want to make from a board perspective is our job is to administer the plan from an investment and actuarial standpoint. We cannot implement or funding solutions or change benefit structures. So I think this brings me to really the de-risking plan that we did in January of 2021. We as a board are trying to help facilitate a solution, not a particular one. And one of those things is trying to eliminate variables. And one of those variables is trying to understand when this plan will run out of money. One of the concerns was certainly last year with the markets. As people know, the financial markets were down 20% in the first 3 months of the year to only finish up 20% by year end. We've modeled out, as Dave and Dave will talk about, but modeling out at a 7% return really only buys us a few months. However, if the markets decline, we run out of money before a solution is found. And I want to emphasize, this was not a political recommendation at all. This was an investment decision to de-risk. We make investment decisions pretty much every day within the Wyoming retirement system. So the bottom line is we have, as Polly said, we have 5 years to get this right. From when this hearing started this morning to when we're finished, it's going to cost us $42,000 a day in terms of the money that's being lost. And this is going to continue until we find a solution. And again, we're not here to advocate any particular solution, but again, we just want to make sure that there is a solution. The FIRA only makes up 1% of our total assets, but that really doesn't matter because behind every pension, there's a person. Most of these all the FIRA folks are retired. They've worked hard. We don't want to see these people left high and dry. So I just want to finish, Mr. Chair, on a positive note. We think this may be one of our better opportunities for a fix because it's certainly one of our last. The economy is gaining. I don't know if folks can see over my right shoulder, but Highway 22, the second busiest road in Wyoming, which is bumper to bumper traffic, thanks to all the tourists, are back. Oil prices are up. Investment returns are very good. And as you all this morning talking about federal grants, ARP funds, et cetera. And frankly, most importantly, the funds still hold some corpus. So again, we're here as a support to try to come up with a solution that can work for really all constituents. And I just want to also say one special thanks to our legislative liaisons who have been really helpful in helping think about this and carrying the water. So those are my remarks, Mr. Chairman, and I send it back to our executive director.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Mr. Chapman? Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your attendance today. Dave, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
I
you,
have
Mr.
two chairmen I
Chairman.
have to, actually 3 chairmen I have to thank. Between Polly's presentation and Board Chairman Tom Chapman's presentation, I'm not sure I have that much to add. I just want to reiterate a couple of points just to make sure things are clear. Remember, we're talking here about FIRA. For members of the committee that are been on the committee a while, you know about FIRA. Senator Steinmetz, Representative Stith, welcome to FIRA. It's a closed plan 40 years ago to new hires since 40 years ago, 1 July 1981, are in Plan Fire B. And I do want to distinguish the situation in Fire A, the closed plan, from the situation in our 7 other open plans. As Chairman Chapman mentioned, I'm working on a letter to send to you all about our annual funding status, the normal letter you get during the summer to discuss our actuarial results. But our 2020 investment returns were 11.03%, exceeding our 7% target. The funding status and projections improved in all the open plans. And as Tom mentioned, the PE plan, the large public employee plan, is rated at almost 75% and projected to be above 100% in 25 years. Fire B, which may come up today, is at 95.9% funded on an actuarial basis and above 100% funded on a market value basis. and projected to be above 100% on a actuarial basis within 5 years in 2026. Fire A is rated at 17.7%, given the change to the 1% assumed rate of return. And it's expected to be exhausted in about 5 years, almost exactly 5 years from now, in 60 months in June of 2026. Fire A's problems are not due to poor investment results. With the support of this committee, the investment program has produced excellent results over the last few years, including good results from last year. I remind the committee about Mr. Chapman's remark that behind every pension is a person. All the Fire A members are now retired. There was one active member the last couple of years. That person retired in May, so everyone's retired now. As of right now, there are presently 266 pensioners. That's 192 retirees and 74 beneficiaries, typically a surviving spouse. The average age is 73.4 years. It'll be several decades before this group passes on. As Tom mentioned, the financial decline is accelerating. This has been in a gradual decline over the last few years. When the last time a bill was actually introduced and got a bill number, that was in House Bill 51 in 2014. At the beginning of that year, the fund held $147 million. It was down to 90 million at the 1 January of this year. So your starting position is 57 million worse. The problem is that with $90 million, even if you earn 7% on it, that's 6.3 million. But the beneficiary payments, pensioner payments going out will be 16.3 million. You're going to be down $10 million. And so you'll start the next year with a loss, even with good returns. And the reality is once you start getting down to this range, 7% of not much is not much and not enough to really sustain the fund. If you kept it in the stock market at 7%, you might extend the funding out, not from 60 months, you might get 70, 72 months, you might get 9, almost a year. But you expose the fund to a severe loss if the market drops 20% or 15%, or you hit a rocky patch. It's easy to have this fund exhaust in 48 months or 51 months. And that's why the board took the de-risking action effective 1 January. And as Tom mentioned, the present decline, you can think of it this way, it's about $42,000 a day. When we wake up tomorrow morning, we'll be 42,000 down from where we are now. As Tom mentioned, de-risking the plan in January of 2021 removed a variable from the situation. Returns are less, but fairly certain. We do believe this fund will run out of money in June of 2026 unless a solution is adopted. The board felt that it was their fiduciary duty to protect the remaining corpus to buy time for all the stakeholders. And again, as Tom mentioned, the board does not advocate for any particular solution, but rather a solution. I've been in contact with the governor's office. That is also the governor's position. This may be the best opportunity for a fix. It is certainly one of the last. As Tom mentioned, the economy is gaining, state investment results are better, federal grants are available, and the fund still holds some corpus. WRS will work with the JAC and all the stakeholders. We have an Excel tool with which several members may be acquainted that can model several potential solutions. I want to add some special thanks to Representative Schwartz on the committee, who worked tirelessly with various stakeholders and had hosted many informational sessions. Mr. Chairman, I also want to thank you for your remarks at the Management Council hearing when this item was amended to add Fire A to the interim work of the committee. I will paraphrase, I won't get this exactly right, but I believe the original wording was presented to you as perhaps the committee would want to study the sustainability of the Fire A pension fund. And I believe your response was, I don't know if that's the right wording. I think we already knew the sustainability of it. It's not sustainable. We need to look at some solutions. I think that was not only brought a chuckle to the room, but also was completely accurate. So thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, to emphasize a couple of things or answer a couple of questions, Representative Stith, you asked about the issue in Fire A of a pensioner a retired firefighter marrying someone much younger and then making that person available for a potential lifetime benefit for a considerable period of time. And that is a flaw in the current Fire A situation. Typically, pension plans are like the public employee plan, where if you want to designate someone as a beneficiary A, you pay for it up front, you get a reduced benefit. It's included in the Fire A situation. That's not terribly unusual. There are pension plans like that. But there are usually some limits as to who you can designate. And in the Fire and PE plan, you can designate someone other than your spouse, but they can't be older than 10 years or can't be younger than 10 years of the primary member. And you can't change your beneficiary once you're retired. We insure 2 lives. Those 2 lives, you can't get a third one in there. But that's a flaw in the current Fire A situation, and we're dealing with a current situation. I probably shouldn't say any more about it, right, Counselor? Yeah, so I won't. Well,
That's why it's funny. You just looked at your lawyer. He gave you that nod. It wasn't like you're pleading the fifth, but it just,
Yeah, that's right. Well, anyway, I probably have already gone too far, but I suspect that in the end, you can't change what has been done, but you can change that going forward. That's the usual situation in pension land. So you could say from this date forward, you can't designate a new beneficiary, or you can put some age limits on it. So there's some legislative remedies for that, I do believe. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation and remarks, subject to any questions from you or the rest members of the committee.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up for questions. What I think we'll do is go ahead and if you have questions for Dave, we'll go ahead and ask him now. Then we'll take a break and we'll come back and finish up with this. So sure, go ahead.
So Dave, when the retirement folks did the de-risking, did you consult with and take with Fire A representatives and with their group determine whether that's what they wanted to do?
The board did not consult with any stakeholder groups, not the employers nor the pensioners. The board took this on as a strictly financial asset management situation, given the life of the fund and the fiduciary responsibility to make those funds last as long as possible.
So you go from a $132 million liability to a $393 million liability, and you don't consult them. That doesn't make any sense to me. And basically, you forced an economic recession on them, and you cost them what, probably at least a year worth of benefits without even talking to them. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Go ahead.
Representative Nicholas, I appreciate the perspective. The board does not agree with that. You don't know whether we cost the fund a year or whether we saved the fund more than a year. No one can predict what the market results are going to be.
All the more reason why it seems to me you should ask the beneficiaries of the fund and ask them what they want and what they would prefer to have.
The board felt that this was not an issue. This was strictly a financial issue, given the measures of volatility and the risk to the fund once the time frame had gotten that short.
I'm just telling you, if I was a Fire A member, I'd have been damn pissed at you guys. I really would have been. I just don't think it was fair. At least not to give them full notice and run through all the actuarial numbers and let those guys to help decide. It's just surprising to me. So.
Well, the Fire A people have, of course, been involved. Mr. Crank, who you'll hear from shortly, has attended several WRS meetings and so on. And of course, once the board made that decision, they did notify all the stakeholders in December before that decision was implemented. That included letters to all the legislators, the governor's office, and all the pensioners. I understand the perspective.
Okay, Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, 2 questions. One on this de-risking issue, which is hard for me to get my head around, but if you combined statutorily changed the scheme and combined Fire A with Fire B, then this de-risking, would that be necessary?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, Representative Seth, if there was the time frame was extended out, and if you combine the plans, and we've modeled that, that's been a legislative solution. We don't think they're combined now, but we believe the legislature might have the power to do that. Then you take the combined fund is rated at about 64% using our standard 7% return actuarial analysis. And then it's on a decline. It would exhaust itself. The combined plan does fail in 22 to 25 years. It does buy time.
Well, that assumes that you just continue with the same contribution and all things said. There's no
Right. Right.
At least with respect to fireman B,
Yeah.
we know that there's no contribution to fireman A. That just assumes you keep all the same contributions from all the working members in fireman B, and that delays the inevitable for a bit. So
Thank you,
that
Mr. Chairman.
that
You're
assumes that
you're
there's
exactly
no other-
correct.
No other adjustments.
Right. If you make no other adjustments, it fails. So you got to make some other adjustments. With regard to whether the board, if you did combine them, what would the board do for the investment posture for the Fire A funds? I can't speak for the board. Mr. Chairman, my other chairman's on. I never speak for the board. But once you extended the timeline out past 5 years, there would be every opportunity to put those things back into a diversified investment with about a 7% estimated long-term return. The board makes no representation about its returns in a given year or even a 5-year term. 7% is a long-term target over 10, 20, 25 years and so on. But yes, if you combine the funds, the fund would be extended and it would be eligible to be put back in the diversified pool.
That's great. So come back, and I'm just going to say, you can call it's strange when you come to the legislature and call everybody a chairman. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting the chairman when you're in the legislature. But Representative Stith, follow up.
Mr. Chairman, one question, jumping back to the other topic of beneficiaries, pensions. I think the theory of pensions is that it's not a gift or welfare, it's deferred compensation. It's something that firefighters earn and you defer their compensation. What's your understanding of how much difference it would make if we changed the beneficiary rules and said, hey, if you retired in 2001 and got married to somebody in 2004, for example, this theory of deferred compensation really doesn't apply much to that person you married in 2004, and just say, hey, that person doesn't get a benefit. How much difference would that make? Or is it just annoying people at the edges without making a material difference in the solvency of the plan?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Smith, I'm not sure that I can precisely calculate what difference that scenario would make. It's probably not that material. Most of the surviving beneficiaries are of age, contemporaries with their retiree. There are a couple of odd situations, and a legislative fix on that aspect would primarily be a preventive medicine to make sure it didn't get out of hand and you didn't have some individual payments that were embarrassing. Yeah, I don't think it would have a material effect on it. I think it would also be very difficult to go back to 2001 and 2004 or anything like that. I think you could do that prospectively. Say from here on, here's the rules on beneficiaries. I don't know if you could come back and modify an existing benefit.
Anything else, Representative Stith? Anyone else?
Well, if we do nothing, there won't be any benefits after 2026. And so it's just gone. And and that's been some of the position of some of the legislatures over time and saying, look, either you guys, fireman A, modify and reduce your benefits to preserve your benefits for all of your members, or it'll run out. I've heard that discussion and various legislators sitting in this chair saying that comment 2 years ago and 10 years ago. That's the other option.
That's true, Representative Nicholas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're completely accurate in what you said. I do wonder, though, when I hear those remarks, I think it reflects somewhat of the frustration that everyone feels on this topic. And that as both you and Senator Perkins have talked about sometime, that the committee, of course, does need to respect the wishes of the entire body. I believe the legislature probably has the power to implement that kind of a solution, which is essentially no solution. But it was probably advisable to somehow have a vehicle to have that as a sense of the whole body. Because that would be a big decision.
Go ahead, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the magic wand were handed to you, what is the amount of money that's needed to make this Fire A actuarially sound through the lifespan of it, you know, until the last beneficiary is gone? And so what would that number be? And then as a portion of that number, how much are the 9 or 7 municipalities that participated in it? What's their appetite for their contribution? And what discussions have you had about how much they'd be willing to share in that solution of funding that number you're about to try and share with us?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, the answer in a lump sum dollar amount to make the fund whole and actuarially sound is the number that Polly gave you, about $140 million. In talking to the cities in some of these discussions that Representative Schwartz tirelessly held, the cities recognized there are 9 entities, 9 legacy Fire A entities. 6 of them are cities, 3 of them are county elements. You got the city of Casper, about 30%, city of Cheyenne, about 30%. And then they had the city of Sheridan, city of Rock Springs, city of Laramie, and then Rollins has a small amount. And then there are 3 county entities, Natrona County Airport, Natrona County Fire Protection District, and Campbell County Fire Protection District, relatively smaller players in this, 9 employers total. They have communicated that in the end, they recognize they have some responsibilities here, and they would be willing to, certainly favorably consider, nobody likes it, but they would favorably consider legislation that would require them to pay something on the order that they were looking at in the original House Bill 51 out of the 2014 session. That number varied a little bit because there were numerous amendments and numerous studies, but roughly it was somewhere around the order of about $352,000 a year for Casper, and somewhere around anywhere from 1.1 million to 1.3 million a year for the collection of the 9 entities. Whether that's the right number today, I can't say, but something on that order of magnitude. So somewhere for the city of Casper between 350 to maybe 450,000. There's been a little inflation over 7 years, something like that. Is that helpful?
Anything else? Follow up, ask your questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to round that 1.3 to 1.5 to 2 million just for inflation as a guesstimated number. What percentage or over how many years would that be to say if the total number is 140 that's needed to make it sound, and then the local entities are willing to do 2 million a year over how many years? So then where does that leave the state making up the difference? Is what I'm trying to get to is kind of 2 lump sum figures here. What would the local side be all in and the state side be all in, just to better understand that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, excellent questions. We call that the amortization period. There was 2 amortization periods discussed in the original House Bill 51. The original bill had a 10-year amortization period, so whatever they were going to pay would be in equal uniform installments over 10 years. It was modified on an amendment which passed the House to make that 15 years. So that is a dial that you can twist. You could consider amortization periods even longer, even 20 years, to make the payment go down. The trouble with that is when you look at the power of money and the ability to run this as a pension plan, remember that pensions are primarily funded with investment earnings. And money up front is much more powerful in terms of generating investment earnings and contributing to the solution than money delayed. So in looking at it, and we can, if we get into modeling, I don't know if I'll have time today, but you can see it makes some difference in the payment, but maybe not a lot. I would be thinking of an amortization period of about 15 years, which was what passed the House back in 2014. The actuaries want it sooner. Everybody wants later. So probably 15, maybe 20 years. There's also an element in there, in you can scale the payment. You can say, okay, it's this much this year, but it's going to grow by X% next year. The trouble with doing that, be very careful if you adopt that solution. It's kind of like a car payment. We'll get you in easy, but then there's an escalator, right? You want to make sure you can handle the escalator. You don't want a community to promise something that they really can't pay 10 years from now. But something on the order of 2% can work. The idea is there'll be some inflation, there'll be some community growth. Maybe the city of Casper or the city of Cheyenne could afford 2% more next year, but I wouldn't go any more than that because you get into an unsustainable basis for the city managers in both of those places.
You're done? Okay. Thank you. That you must have pricked an idea within Representative Stith. So,
Mr. Chairman, two questions. One is, how much difference does it make if you eliminate the 3% COLA? And second, the $140 million to fix isn't enough unless you get out of this de-risking plan, right? Because the $140 million presumes a 7% return, right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative said, absolutely. If you came up with a $140 million drop from the sky, we'd be back in the stock market, of course. I think I can answer your question pretty precisely on the COLA. Well, there's a couple ways to answer the question. And we can model something if you want to put in a 0% COLA. It doesn't make much difference in the near term. You can think of about 15%, because 5 years, 3% a year, yeah, about 15%. And that doesn't buy you a lot of time. It does make a significant difference over 20 or 30 years. For example, the benefit payments this year are projected to be $16.7 million. That's with the 3% COLA. If you took it to a 0% COLA, it would only be $16.5 million. The difference is $247,000. Not that much of a savings. But if you go out 10 years, in 2031, the projected benefits are $18.1 million. The benefit payments with a 0% COLA would be $13.3 million. The difference is $4.8 million. So you can see that the COLA makes a difference in the out years in the benefit payment.
Your trend line is also now started to decrease. So the actual dollar for dollar comparison is actually less in year one than it is in year 10. I mean, so the actual amount of benefit decreases, and we understand why. I mean, it's a closed system and everybody's retired and there's fewer of them.
And Mr. Chairman, it's important to bear in mind two things. There is this 3% escalator. The population is shrinking. I believe last year there were 272 pensioners. Now there's 266. We've 6 more members passed away. But the escalator overwhelms that for the next 10 years or so. According to the actuaries, projected benefits under the existing law, which we really won't get that far unless we have a funding solution, but the projected payments would actually peak 10 years from now. They're going to keep going up. They're 16.3 million today. They're going to go to 18.1 million in 2031. And then, but there's a difference if you eliminate the COLA, then you would see a declining payment every year. And the payment in 2031 would be 13.2 million. And so right now there's the 3% escalator, then it's overwhelming the actuarial effects for the next 10 years or so. Then the fund starts to decline under the existing law.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So real quick question for you. Have you run an analysis that what contribution would it take if there's a combination between Fire A and Fire B, and then there's additional contribution from the state and from local agencies? What what kind of number does that turn into?
I've got some reports. I can detail that in a little more detail, Mr. Chairman, but I believe the answer, one way to express it is how much do you have to increase just contributions by on existing Fire B's salary, which has its own complications. Everyone should know there's certain people, certain employers in Fire B that are unique to Fire B or never part of Fire A. Examples are Evansville, Mills, Jackson Hole, Teton County.
Right, now, all I'm asking is for the.
But anyway,
additional
22.5% of additional pay.
22 point, which is what in like in year one, what is that in year one?
In dollars?
Yes.
I'll have to look that up.
Okay. Well, why don't we take our break and you can look that up, but I know that you don't have to answer that question now, but I think that's one of the things, one of the pieces of information we'll need as we kick around and look what it is that we can do and there's.
Yeah, I've got some reports. I think I have the answer somewhere in my book.
Great. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and then we'll do that. And actually, when we come back, why don't you think about that? We'll just come back and we'll have, I think, Pat, it's your turn. I think you're next. And after Pat speaks, we might circle back and talk a little bit more about some what ifs. Okay?
Thank you, Mr.
Is that
Chairman.
okay with you? And Tom, I don't know if you're going to stay on or not, but you don't care because you're at home. So.
Thanks for dressing up, Tom.
Here's the question.
I'll stick around.
You have pants on? Thank you. We'll stay adjourned for 10 minutes. go ahead and turn on your mic and we'll go ahead and get this, hear what you have to say.
Okay. My name is Pat Crank, and I'm here today representing the Fire A members. I've represented Fire A for a long time, 10, 12 years maybe. And so if you have questions, I got a lot of history someplace buried in my ugly head, and maybe I can help, but I have some prepared comments and then I'll take questions. The goal of Fire A is to have a solvent pension plan that provides the benefits that those retirees were promised when they retired. We don't care how you get there, but the legislature, retirement, and the cities who employed Fire A firefighters need to make sure that these retirees are not left without retirement benefits. I came here today, Mr. Chairman, and I promised myself I was not going to pick a fight. But I listened to Mr. Swindell, so I have to pick a little fight. The actions of the retirement board last year in going from a 7% return to essentially a 1% return are outlandish. I mean, my analogy is they were standing at the edge of an old forest that hadn't been logged and had all kinds of deadfall and brush, and it was a dry year. And we all knew that at some stage that forest was going to burn. But they threw a flare in the edge of the forest and lit it. And now, because of their choices to go to essentially no returns, this fund will be dead. And my clients and the people that honorably served 9 cities in Wyoming will be without retirement benefits. They started, and today they show up, no solutions. We don't have a solution. We just did this and we caused this problem. And quite frankly, if I were in your shoes, I'd be kind of angry. Say, why did you cause the problem? And Mr. Co-Chair Nicholas, you're exactly right. They did not consult with us. They never talked about this. The first time I learned they made this move was when I started getting multiple calls from my 70 and 80-year-old clients saying, oh my God, I didn't know we were going to run. What am I going to do without retirement in 5 years? I mean, they should have at least had the common courtesy to call us, talk with us about it. They have the power. I mean, they could have overridden our desires, but let us tell our members first, so I don't have panic calls. So that was wrong. And so that's my one fight I'm going to pick today. I think it's important that you recognize one thing today for sure. Fire A beneficiaries have no Social Security benefits. They weren't eligible to contribute. They can't draw them today. So in large part, this is their entire income now in their retirement years. If a Fire A participant retired early enough to work another job and contributed to Social Security, that member may have Social Security benefits, but the large majority have no Social Security benefits. And I will submit the cause of the problem is not important. I mean, I've been on this cusp for 10 years, as has Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman and others. Everyone wants to point fingers at each other. This is caused by the legislature. This is caused by the retirement. This is caused by the cities not contributing. And I will submit today, that's not important. I mean, we have a monstrous problem. We have 200 people that in 4 to 5 years will have no income. People that honorably served their communities, rescued people from burning buildings, did their job, and relied on the promise that was made to them that if you do this job, when you retire, you'll have a retirement. So the thing we should be focused on totally over this year is we need to collectively work to find a solution to make sure that those firefighters do not go without. That's the critical thing. So I'm here not to talk like a cat covering poop in the garden like Mr. Swindell did about this decision. I'm here to offer some solutions, okay? There are no solutions offered from retirement, but here are 3 solutions. I don't know, and I've talked to Mr. Co-Chair during the session, is there some possibility of using what I'm just going to call COVID relief funds? I know there's an acronym for that. would it be, would contributions either directly by the state or by transferring that money to the city and allowing them to contribute back into the Fire A fund, is that a possibility? You know, we love to spend federal money when we can save state money. And all the money that the cities have is state money anyway, because it's transferred to them in their block grant. So that's a solution I think we need to study hard, and I'm probably not smart enough to figure that out. But I would hope that the committee would ask LSO and the bright lawyers that you have to work on that and see what the possibilities are there. The second solution is some bill like House Bill 51 that was considered by the legislature in 2014. I was there the morning that died in a Senate committee, Mr. Chairman. I forget what committee it was, but
No, it was Senate Appropriations Committee.
I don't think it was appropriations, but you could be right. You were gone that day. You had
The Senate
commitment.
Appropriations Committee in 2014, and it was, the committee was comprised of Chairman Bebout, me, I think wasn't Dan Dockstetter on it, and John Hastert, and no,
That's
Kurt
right.
wasn't
Meyer
on it.
was there.
Well, I
Senator
guess
Meyer
we-
was there.
I think Kurt was not, but anyway.
But what a sad morning. I mean, I remember you two being the engineers of that bill, that you took it on as an interim study, and we had several meetings, and the idea was that all three parties should bleed equally. That's how I described that bill, that the Fire A would give up part of their COLA for their contribution. The cities would contribute some money, and then in the end, the state contribution was larger. You know, they bled more. The state was willing to bleed more than the cities and Fire A. And it passed out of the House, and I thought we were rolling, and then it dies. And what a tragedy, because that is a real solution to this problem. I think it's still the solution that Representative Schwartz worked his behind off over, the last interim to try to get done. I think that people will be amenable to that. I mean, we got to figure out the numbers. And the problem is, the difference between 2014 and today probably cost us 50 million bucks. So, we have to come up with even more money, but that's a very workable solution. And I think that's where we should go, probably. And then the third solution is something that my clients and I started recently. So we believe, from studying the statutes passed in 1981, that there is only one fireman's pension account. And the AG's office has said that in several opinions, but
I was
there's,
going to ask you, were you the AG that wrote that one opinion, or was that?
I think those both preceded me, actually. I could have been, Mr. Chairman, but if I did, that was a really good opinion. So the argument is that there's one fireman's pension account, and all benefits for both Fire A and Fire B should be paid out of that one fireman's pension account. Historically, since 1981, the State Retirement Board and State Retirement has managed that as two sub-accounts, one for Fire A and one for Fire B. And in their thinking, only the benefits for Fire A have to be paid solely out of Fire A account, and the benefits for Fire B have to be paid solely out of Fire B account. We believe that's wrong. And we think Judge Rogers, when we get done briefing it and make our arguments, will agree with us. That's a good thing for Fire A. I'm sure Fire B doesn't like it, and they've expressed that to me. But if, you heard today that if we're right and it is one account, there are enough funds to pay Fire A and Fire B retirees for like 26 years. Ultimately, it's not a total solution to the problem, because I want Fire B recipients to get their full retirement just like I want Fire A. So either city contributions or state contributions, or the Fire B participants who are still paying contributions need to be increased so that we can manage this one large fund to make sure there's enough money in there to pay for both Fire A and Fire B. That's not a novel idea. if you look at the big fund, and so the state's argument in the lawsuit is, well, that's ridiculous. They have different benefits. And our response is, of course they do. And the legislature decided what those benefits are. But that's not a novel idea because the legislature did that with the big plan. I mean, I'm a member of the old group under the big plan. And so my retirement is based on my high 3 years, and I get a greater percentage for each year I worked as compared to newer employees who were hired after ever when the legislature made that major modification. Their retirement is based on their high 5 years, and they get a lower percentage per year. So in the big plan, the model plan, you're paying different groups of people depending on when they were hired on and when they begin their work, different benefits. And that's how we view Fire A and Fire B. I won't lie to you, Fire A is an amazing retirement plan. And I'd lose all credibility if I tried to argue differently with you. Let's just say it. It's the elephant sitting in the corner of the room. My Fire A clients are making more in retirement than they did when they were working. My Fire A retirees are making $61,000 a year. They may have only made $35,000 before they retired. But I will submit, it's not just the 3%, but if you go back and look at historically, and I could do this, I can't do it today, but like in 96, that's the kind of root of all evil. In 96, retirement came and said, there is so much money in Fire A, cease all contributions, kill off that 50% fire tax, kill off what the firemen are paying, kill off what the cities are contributing, and let's increase their benefits. So, if think about, in hindsight, that's amazing because let's pay them more, but let's cease all income to the fund. That's where this problem started. Doesn't matter who was at fault or what happens. That's the problem we need to solve. We've asked the district court for a ruling on that issue, whether it's one big fund or if retirement's right and the AG's office is right, that it's two separate sub-funds. We have meetings scheduled. For instance, Mr. O'Donnell's here. He's the Cheyenne City Attorney. Cheyenne has agreed with our position, so they'll be on our side of the lawsuit. Rock Springs has said, we have no obligation. It's those darn legislators that did this. The AG's office says that the retirement system is right and it's two sub-funds. And so, they're kind of three diametrically opposed positions. What we're trying to get done is to stipulate to the facts. The facts are the facts. Legislation was passed on certain dates, and then just brief it for the court and let her make a legal decision.
So you don't have a hearing date set for, I'm assuming you're going to summary judgment on the territory judgment.
I hope we don't go to summary judgment. We have a pretrial scheduling conference set on the 28th. And what I'm hoping, and there's a call between all the parties and all the attorneys, AG's office, Rock Springs, Cheyenne. I'm hoping that we can say, okay, the facts are the facts, and here's a briefing schedule. So we'll just brief it essentially like a summary judgment motion, Mr. Chairman, but that's the plan. And if that happens, maybe we'll have a decision by the end of the year. If we do, that dramatically changes the landscape for what you need to do. Maybe you only need to come up with 20 million versus 142 million or whatever it is. Let me just address a couple more things and then I'll take questions. I saw on your interim study topic that someone was concerned that maybe this committee would take some action that might affect the lawsuit. There was some limitation or something like that. I can't remember the exact language, but I would submit that silly. I hope you do something that affects the lawsuit because, if you come up with a plan like House Bill 51 in 2014, that solves the problem, I'll dismiss the lawsuit and I need to talk to my clients, but that's all we want is an actuarially funded plan. And I think it'd be irresponsible. I mean, you're facing a dire problem for these folks and it's your job to act. And I know you can act and there's a lot of smart people here and I hope you do act. So I would hope that that doesn't limit the kind of things you would think about going forward. Just a couple things. I'm going to disagree with Polly just a little bit. I think it's just the way she phrased it versus the way I phrased it. So you understand, originally, the Fire A plan had what was called an escalator COLA. When you retire under Fire A, your starting retirement benefit was set by what's called a fireman's first class. That was a person who had about 5 years in. He wasn't a chief. He wasn't a deputy chief. So it's this kind of lower level. That's the level at which you started. But every year you got a COLA that was based on what the collective bargaining agreement was for your community. So just play that out one more step. If you worked for Casper and the firefighters union negotiated an 8% collective bargaining raise that year, the Casper firefighters got an 8% COLA and it's compounded. And if Cheyenne only got a 5%, those Cheyenne firefighters got 5% and that was compounded. So that's why you end up with this kind of anomaly where the elephant in the corner of the room, that a person could be drawing more in retirement benefits than what they made when they were working. Generally, it's the other way. You draw 63% of what you made when you were working full time. Not our fault. It's a good thing for my clients, but it's what the legislature said should happen and the body passed. So that's the COLA. That ended in 2004 and we went to a straight 3% COLA after that. It is a compounded COLA. Representative Schwartz bill that he was proposing in the interim was to go to a 1.5% simple COLA, less burden on the fund. It doesn't grow by 1.5% every year, so that's a thought. And Representative Stith, I gotta address your question about could a 35-year-old marry a 90-year-old firefighter and draw benefits? I guess the answer is yes. I've never thought about that. I doubt there's a bunch. I hope I don't insult you, but I doubt there's a bunch of gold diggers out there hunting down my clients.
I don't think you speak for your clients in that regard.
When
Pat, I don't know.
When I call them in, I tell Robbie to call in the Walking Dead because they come in wheelchairs with oxygen bottles and stuff. And if you're concerned about that, Representative Stith, we should ask retirement. I mean, are there some 25-year-old women drawing benefits because they married an old? Let's figure out the nature of the problem. I doubt it's a problem. Maybe it's one or two people. Is kind of what they implied and gave, looked at the attorney and he took the fifth. But let's ask him how many situations like that are out there. And I will tell you from my perspective, I wouldn't get legal advice from Mr. Swindell. You cannot change benefits once they're vested and once a person begins to retire, to draw them. You can change benefits before they retire. You can change benefits for different classes of worker, but it's my understanding, and I think this is pretty firm law, that if I retire and I'm paid, 18.5% of my high 3 years of salary, I'm entitled to do that, and to take that away would be a deprivation of a constitutionally protected property interest under the Constitution clause of the U.S. Constitution and the Wyoming Constitution, and it's likely a civil rights violation. So I don't think you can go back and say, man, you were making 61,000. We don't think that's fair. Now you make 30. I think that buys you a lawsuit. You can change stuff going forward, but it's hard because they're all retired and they're all vested. They took the offer. There was a plum out there. And if you work 20 years, you can grab this plum. Once you grab the plum, I think you get to eat it. I don't think you can say, nah, we're gonna give you a lemon. I don't think you can change those, but that's, you
So,
gotta ask your attorneys that.
Mr. Coach, and I would disagree with that. And we had this discussion back in 2014 because the statutes say it is not a guarantee specifically. And when we had this, and in addition to that, you have benefits that were increased and modified. So not part of any contract, even after some of these folks retired. And so as a result of that, I don't think that there's a constitutional right to that. We can take what we give away in that regard because it's strictly statutory and because there was no promise or guarantee it. They just got increased benefits because we said we've got more money. So, I mean, those are the issues we got to have, but there's clearly another side to that argument.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman, I mean, I understand that. I'm just giving you my opinion. I've long held that opinion. I made that argument in front of numerous legislative committees. And so with all due respect, I disagree, Mr. Co-Chairman, but you ought to ask your lawyers that question.
That's right. You know, that's why one lawyer in a small town starves, but two can make a pretty good living. So.
Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead and ask if anybody have questions for former Attorney General Pat Crank. Go ahead, Mark. Excuse me, Representative Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Crank, thank you for your information and representing those fine folks. You mentioned at the beginning that you were all excited about the investment options that were changed, the investment change. And I'm curious, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a scenario, but let's say that investment change hadn't been made and the stock market were to have received some kind of a fallback, okay, of maybe 20%. And instead of 5 years that the plan might run out, let's say it might run out in 3 years as a result of that, how fired up would you have been at that point? And then in terms of your concern about the investment choices.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Kinner, I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I'm not an investment expert. What I disagreed with was that we were not contacted. The first time my clients knew about it was when they got a letter saying, you're about to eat cat food. Your retirement's going to be gone. You know, I would have liked to have had my people to be able to have input into that. And at the end of the day, I don't disagree that the retirement board has that fiduciary duty and they get to make those choices. But to not have done that, and I've chewed on Mr. Swindell as hard as I can, and he never apologized. And then he sat here and listened to Co-Chair Nicholas tell him he didn't think that was right. And his statement was, I understand that perspective. That's not the way, you know, and then in the same token, he says, there's a person behind every retirement plan. We'll treat those people behind that retirement plan with respect and dignity and talk to them. Prior director always did that. That's why I'm excited. But, you know, hindsight's 2020, Representative Kinner, we'd have more money because we've had these great investment returns since they made that decision. So maybe it lasts 6 years instead of 5. I understand that. And if there's a huge stock market meltdown, it'll only last 3. It's just a sad state of affairs. But it drives the final nail in the coffin and makes this body, this committee, and the cities and my clients act quicker and maybe with more haste than they needed to. You know, they lit the fire. Now we got to put the forest fire out. They lit the fire and now they say, we don't know how to put it out. We don't have any expertise on that. That's my problem.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Go ahead, Representative Skinner.
Okay, so very good. But maybe in a way, that was the catalyst that is going to bring us to a point where we'll maybe finally address that. Wouldn't that be a good thing? Don't you agree?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Kinner, I'd love to have this figured out because then my people have a retirement, you know, but you had to catalyst from Jackson sitting over here named Representative Schwartz, who was working on it. You know, I thought it was an incredibly poorly handled and informed decision to drive that final nail and make us rush more than we might need to.
Go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
Kind of wrapped it up.
Well, I was enjoying hearing the former Attorney General pontificate. If you want to wrap that up, I guess we can. Okay.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Hicks, thank you so much. I'm ready to go to Casper. I get another meeting.
So thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Crank? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, I think what we'll do is I think we've got some things to chew on here. Give our respects to Mr. Doty and tell him we would have loved to hear him. If he'd like to submit written comments at some point in time or talk to us in the future, we'd be more than happy to hear from him. And what if we can, I think we were talking, I think we've got a kind of way that we want to at least move forward with a subcommittee or something like that, a working group to try and work on some of these things. And that's kind of where we're headed. But with that, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and end the testimony provision. Don't worry, Dave, we got a lot of work for you lined out. So keep your actuaries warmed up. But so right now we'll go ahead and close that off if that's okay. And we'll take public comment at this point. If you got a final comment or something, Pat.
I just need to make this offer because I've made it before. Mr. Chairman, I mean, we'll give up our COLA. It's the only bargaining chip I have left, so I hate to give it up without getting anything. So, but in this process, I mean, if the COLA is a huge deal, I'd have to consult with my clients, but we'll give it up. I mean, we want a actuarially funded system.
Gotcha.
And that's more important to us than a COLA. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, with that, go ahead. So we've got some public comment. Ms. McDonald, come on up. Go ahead, Mike. Glad to see you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, members of the committee. Good to see all of you again. I come before you wearing a different hat than the last time we all saw each other. I'm Mike O'Donnell. I'm now the city attorney for the city of Cheyenne. I'm going to make this very brief. Everybody said just about everything, Mr. Chairman, except this. The municipalities that bear the responsibility, either morally and or legally, for the Fire A members who are facing the failure of their pension are in kind of the same situation. You know what the fiscal situation of this state is right now. There's conversations about eliminating the direct distribution to cities. If this obligation lands on the cities without assistance, and significant assistance from the state, it's going to push Cheyenne and Casper and Rock Springs and Sheridan probably over the edge into something that we've never seen before, where we can't meet our obligations to our citizens. I offer to you today that the city of Cheyenne, and I believe I speak for my sister and brother cities, we're willing to come to the table. We're willing to help. We're willing to carve out of our own hide some money to help solve this problem, but we sure can't do it alone. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mr. McDonald? Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else any other public comment that would like to take today? Any other public comment? Yes, sir. Come on ahead.
I'll use my official name, Robert Simmons. I'm a retired firefighter out of Sheridan. Been a Plan A, started working in '77. Might want to offer also the assistance of working together to find a solution. I also want to make it known that Mr. Crank does represent a lot of the Plan A people, but he doesn't represent them all. So we've got to make sure that all of them get some representation in here of these people. I mean, nothing against Mr. Drake at all. It's just that, you know, some of us have our own attorneys. Some of the other communities around the state that have retirees have looked at some other solutions. So my solution to it is to bring in some people from each one of the employing agencies that are retirees to be part of that group. That's what my request would be.
Okay, and could you just amplify that a little bit when you say bring in a kind of a representative from these disparate groups? Are you talking about bringing one in from each, served in each of the cities and counties that are affected, or?
Yes, so
That's
that
what
would be what, 9 of them?
9 of them, yeah.
You know, and maybe they can work together and come up with, you know, 1 or 2, but that's what I'd like to see is that, you know, that representation gets spread out to where the retirees are.
Okay, all right, appreciate your insight. Question for you from, is it okay if Representative Larson asks you a question? I don't
Not-
think I can stop him, so I think it's okay if he asks.
That's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Representative Larson.
So would you consider having your group get together and having somebody represent them? Get the 9 people together and then select. We see sometimes this stuff gets, pretty soon we have half of the state of Wyoming on a committee. So it's just something for you to consider, okay?
You know,
Please.
Mr. Chair, my answer to that is there's people that are going to be on both sides of this thing from the fire service. And we want to make sure that, you know, there's some representation there. So both sides. I mean, I know we got people that will scream and yell if you cut the COLA. And I know I've got people that says, take it tomorrow, if that's what it's going to take to solve the problem. And we want to make sure that we are within that same group.
Right. So you know what they say is, you know, the sign of a good compromise is everybody's unhappy. So maybe we can get there.
You know, and I agree. I mean, you know, if everybody loses, then, you know, I think we've come to a good.
Okay.
There will be no real winners and no real losers.
That's right. Thank you. We're just trying to find a way to keep everybody going. All right. Thank you, Mr. Simmons.
Chairman,
Appreciate your time.
Bob.
Oh, wait a second, Bob.
Bob,
Bob, 1 second.
just good to see you again. I'm curious. So if we appoint you as, or you appoint yourself as the representative from Sheridan, what do we do when some other retiree from Sheridan comes in and says, hey, I disagree with Simmons and I disagree with Crank. I want some representation. What point do we have too many people in the room to ever get anything done, Bob?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Kinski, I spent the weekend in Sheridan talking with those folks and the retirees that are up there. And we do communicate with this. We definitely had a big meeting of all of us after that letter. And what works is because I'm down here, it makes getting information and being able to sit in legislature and everything else so much easier. So, and there could be some people up there that do it, but the retirees I know in Sheridan have all asked me to help with this thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Simmons? Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Anyone else wish to participate? Go ahead. Come on up. And by the way, you clean up really well. Go ahead. Mark, glad to have you.
Mr. Chairman, co-chair and committee. My name is Mark Young. I'm a resident of Cheyenne, Wyoming. Live at 3321 Moore Avenue. And I'm a Plan Air. I started in 1979 and retired 34 years later from the Casper Fire. So my comments are brief in the fact that I came here with one objective today. And I think the director of the Wyoming Liquor Dealers Association said it best, and it seems to be the mantra through this entire day, right? Just looking for a solution, right? I can only speak for myself, and I can only speak for my mother. And my father's retired Laramie firefighter, retired as the fire chief, started in the 60s and worked through the 90s. And he passed in 2008. She's 85 years old. And I'm kind of looking out for mom too. She's looking for a solution.
Again, really, my only objective here today was to listen to the tone. What's the tone of the room? And I was really hoping that it would be, my tone meter would be like, you know, off the charts on the good side. And I got to tell you, I feel that. I want to leave here today with a good tone. And I appreciate that from everybody. And as one person who speaks as one plan here, I'm willing to help. If anybody wants to listen, I'll be glad to give you my opinion. So with that, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate that. And Ms. Simmons and other firefighters in here, thank you for your service. We do appreciate it and recognize it. Now, I think one of the last times you and I talked, I think it was just before you retired, and I think at that point you were one of the last 4 working members of Fireman A. Does that sound about right?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was one of the last 4. And one of my peers, division chief, just the last one just retired.
Okay.
Casper Garden.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Chief Young? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your. Anyone else today? Come on up, sir.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob McLaurin. I'm with WHAM. I just said to reiterate what Michael said. WHAM's been working with the 6 cities. We understand that this is a serious problem and we stand ready, willing, and able to work with you to resolve it. So just reinforce what the city attorney said.
Thank you. I
Thanks.
didn't catch your last name, Bob.
McLaurin,
Okay. And who are you with?
WHAM.
Wham. Oh, Wham. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Any questions for Mr. McLaurin? Thank you. Appreciate it, Bob. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and close off public comment. Excuse me, was there anybody in the room online?
No, sir, we
No,
don't
okay.
have any virtual testimony.
All right, with that, we will now go ahead and close off public comment. So now we're back to we're down to committee directives. And so Mr. Co-Chair, I think you had at least one idea working backwards. I think you had one idea with respect to Fireman A pension plan. Do you have a suggestion with respect to how we move forward investigating this?
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair, it's my recommendation that we create a working group, 2 members from the House and 2 members from the Senate. And we'll sit down with Wyoming Retirement. We can sit down with, and then we'll kind of put together a wish list of information that we want to get and put together in history and do our homework on all those things. And over the next perhaps 2 or 3 months, we'll probably come up with 1 or 2 or 3 alternatives that we can bring back to the committee.
Okay. So like anybody have any objections or comments like to modify that? Took that as a motion. We got a second by the Vice President. Any other comment? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Thank you. We'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and assign some members to work on that. And if you miss that meeting, you might be appointed. So be careful. And so we'll work on that. So anything else with respect to Fireman A pension plan? Anything? Seeing none, let's work backwards. Go ahead. Go ahead, Senator Kinski.
So I think you said 2 to 3 months. We're anticipating a possible July meeting. So really we'd be looking at bringing some alternatives back in the early fall.
I think that's right. I think it'll take some time to put this together and get the information and come back with some fairly well fleshed out recommendations for the committee as a whole. I think that's the plan. Co-Chair, thank you. Anything else with respect to Fireman A? All right, let's continuing working backwards. Any action or anybody want to take anything with respect to the liquor division? I don't know, we have to take action at this point, but if I think we need to, I think you're working on, so Senator Guru, I think you're on that working group, and Mr. Krieger and some other folks on that working group. Vice President, you lean forward. Do you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just suggest that we talk to Director Noble. I'd like to be kept appraised of whether they're going, whether they're going to do the RFP and the progress. And so if we could just get progress reports back.
See,
I want to wait till
Yeah, I think
October, November.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, my thought is that I think we can rely on Senator Grew to tell us when it's time to get an update. It may be July, it may be August. And I know that there are a couple other things in the works going on as well, that we'll have to see how those things flesh out.
So I think you're meeting weekly with your group and they're meeting weekly on this issue. And so I think we can, you guys keep surprised. I visited with Rob Krieger out in the hall, who's also on that working group. Policy folks. So anything you want to add, Senator Drew?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, it's just that I'll be glad to let anybody know if anybody else would like to join. We have our next meeting. If anybody would like to listen in, it'd be great. Otherwise, I'll be glad to keep you informed.
Okay.
Either way.
So I've had several different folks comment to me about the implementation of the monthly ad valorem collections that are going on. And so what we may want to do is if we have a meeting in July, I would recommend that we give notice to Dan now that we'd like him to come present in July on that issue, as well as bringing an update to on the liquor thing. And that way he can get his ducks in a row and be ready to present to us in July.
I think that's a good idea. And let's make sure that we invite the county assessors and county treasurers to have a representative or two here as well. Talk about that. My understanding is the implementation is not going well.
So Don,
County
could you work-
commissioners.
can we work on a letter that will go out from us to both to Dan and then also to
Yeah, probably commissioners, the treasurers, and the assessors.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And I believe the Joint Revenue Committee, that was their bill. I believe they may have also be doing something. I just bring that up for a note.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, and I think our perspective is this implementation and effect on revenue on income as opposed to, I don't think we're we just want to know what's going on with that and how that may affect our revenue picture in particular, tax collections. Anything else with respect to the liquor division or the Department of Revenue? Okay, then before that was back on the unfunded state employee leave and liability and vacancy savings. I don't know if there's anything there. If something comes up or there's some developments, we can rely on Kevin, I think, to bring that to us. And Dawn, I think it's just one of those things we want to be aware of, and we can have maybe a more intelligent conversation when we talk about budgets and personnel, and when we get down to the hog killing in December and January. The hog killing.
So with the next order, obviously the rest of it is ARPA and COVID.
This is ARPA and COVID.
So that, as I understand it, and what I've been a part of these meetings with leadership is that basically the concept is that we are kind of being instructed, we being the Joint Appropriations Committee, to monitor and follow governor's processes between now and when basically through when we convene in December, and also for the session, and then any bills that kind of derive from that will primarily come out of this committee. And so as a result of that, I think that it's probably incumbent on us to meet maybe even probably in July, and depending on how things are moving along, either in August or September, even if it's just for a half day, just to get updated and to see where things are going and how that proceeds. So my question then, Mr. Co-Chair, was should we look at dates for July for a meeting in July or first part of August?
Well, I think we know that there's a week in July that's kind of freed up.
No, true.
And I think one of the other things we need to talk about, I think, and listen to the governor this morning and having talked with the governor a couple of times and some other folks, I mean, part of all this process is getting together these mid and longer term range goals about where we think this ought to go. And the governor's going to have some recommendations. I think we'll continue to communicate with the governor's office on what those might be. And because I think it's important, hopefully we can, you know, the more we can collaborate, the more we can have a shared vision about where that goes. And the less we head in 80 and 90 degree different directions. And so I think that's important. So, you know, I think if we could do that, Kevin and Don, we can, and visit with Rennie, and maybe we can work on that. I think it's another thing we could work on with respect to where we're going and where we think we might go. Doesn't have to be, you know, nobody's going to be held in stone, but I think it's important for us to, as we formulate those goals on the longer term, on the drive and thrive provisions of the governor's message. I think it's the more we can collaborate and be on the same page, the better off we'll be. And if we know the differences, the earlier we know the differences, the better we'll be able to have a chance to reconcile. So I think that's important. And I think also with those ARPA funds, I think one of the other things that's really important is I think that we ought to consider in July coming up with some recommendations about how the governor might fund, to the extent that he hasn't already figured out or determined what to do. So the 4 legislative bills that we passed in 2021, but now were unfunded. I think that we're going to find, and Don's going to check on that some more, about the 2 of those we thought we could move because they're already existing programs or something very similar. The other one, maybe I would premise that we've created the programs, we just didn't fund them. And so I think that maybe what to do is maybe we ought to look at those and give at least the governor some idea about a recommendation, at least from this committee, about where we would fund those if we were gonna do that. If we'd gone to the special session, or we were having a special session, the recommendations we would have made to our respective bodies on the amount of funding we would give to those 4 bills. And at least ultimately we'll have the ability to adjust those, but it'll all be over with CARES Act money by the time we meet in session. And that was the only real concern I had with not meeting in the special session. We left those 4 bills off the table, and they were all looking for some CARES Act money. And so anyway, I think that that's something else we ought to look at and at least have a discussion and take up in that January meeting, Mr. Co-Chair. I don't know what your thoughts are. Excuse me, July meeting. What did I say? January. It's because it's so hot outside anyway. Go ahead. Let's go, Andy, and we'll come back to Lloyd because Lloyd always goes first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have no comment on anything you just said. I basically agree, except I keep hearing this reference to a July meeting. Do we have any idea when in July?
I think we're gonna approach that in just a moment.
Okay.
It will not be, I think we're talking about sometime during that week. We were planning on potentially having a special session. Now we're not. We'll do that sometime in that week. So we won't be on top of frontier days. Lloyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, as we talk about the ARP money, we want to have a further conversation on the unemployment insurance and how we're going to address that. There's kind of 2 issues there. That might be worthy of considering in July. And then as we look at some of that infrastructure stuff on broadband and water infrastructure, I think the guidance that we have on water is that if they're approved with the Clean Water Act or the Safe Drinking Water Act, I think was the other one. So maybe a little history on what that is, so that when we see those projects, or if we see those projects, we have an understanding of the basis that qualifies projects for that type of stuff.
I think that's important. We have that. And also, just like I say, we're going to find ourselves up against the gun and get on CARES access. So it's just important whatever we're going to recommend or talk to the governor's office about on CARES Act, we got to get her done. Otherwise, just run out of time. And then some of that's longer term, and I think that goes into understanding what those projects are, so that when we come back and we work on that shared vision for the ARPA money next February, that we have a better understanding, we know where we're going on that. Okay, yeah, makes sense to me. So are you taking notes on this, Don? Okay, yeah, again, anyway, you're looking at me like I thought you were gonna have a half-day meeting. You're already giving me that signal like this is, you're already past half a day.
So we want to know when Kevin's going to go on vacation. We'll schedule a meeting then.
Yeah.
On Trevor's.
Then, of course, we can have somebody who was fishing today cover for him. It's his turn. Anything, members, anything else? On ARPA or CARES or, so you want to look at calendars right now? You want to pull up, what else have we got going on during that week?
Mr. Chairman, the week of July 19th through the 22nd, it looks like, or 23rd, excuse me, the Joint Education Committee is scheduled to meet on Monday and Tuesday, the 19th and 20th. The balance of the week is free of any other committee meetings. I do believe the Management Audit Committee may like to double up, meaning meet on either side of the JAC if you intend to do a one-day meeting. A couple more just quick updates. Tamara and I did take a look at those two other bills over the break and concluded that, yes, the governor could expend those funds immediately if so desired. He does not need to wait until September 1st on the ag and large business legislation. And thank you for the opportunity to review those a little closer. In all likelihood, I know you've mentioned a number of things with the Department of Revenue and updates on ARP. If the schedule permits, we would likely pick up one, if not two, of the other interim topics that have been assigned. Public Works contracting on Senate File 6 might be introduced in that meeting. And ETS was delayed for two reasons. Number one, there is a new interim director who was here earlier in the meeting. Number two, their reporting of agency requests, they don't really have the data collected yet. So that would be better either in that July meeting or even a September meeting.
Okay. So with that, I'm looking at the calendar. So it looks to me like I would just as soon meet the 19th or 20th.
Mr. Chairman, is that when Shine Frontier Days?
Shine Frontier Days is the following week.
Starts on the 24th.
Starts on that's Saturday the 24th. Yes.
And the Mining Association.
I thought CSGOS was in September.
My understanding was it's the very end of September.
It's in Colorado Springs. Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
So forget what he said.
And you want to do it on the 19th rather
I
than
would just
the-
send do it the 19th. I think get it done or get out of town. The closer it gets to Frontier Days, the crazier it's gonna get.
Mr. Chairman, I have a vacation already scheduled on those dates.
Well,
Just
Happy
an
trails.
FYI.
We'll allow you to zoom in from wherever you are. Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Is it still the 19th?
It's the Carbon County Jail.
Bob, are you okay with it? Dude, it's time to pay the piper. He's got some swather work to do. Yeah.
I've got some things going too, but I can just zoom in on that. I want to get it done.
Certainly can. Is that okay? Are you okay? Let's just do this the 19th. And we'll miss you. Yeah, you want to do it? Yeah, I just think we're here. I think we're in this room, save staff some problems and just bring this room. Yeah. So we probably can't find hotels so low. Anything
You got the
else?
barn, you got my house, got your house.
In the barn, we can hang it.
So we went from a half day to an all day. Is what
I think so. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mark.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, okay, that takes care of the July meeting, and I've heard August and September thrown around. Is there any dates talked about that, or even later in the year that would be helpful to plan around?
Great question. Mr. Co-Chair, you have any
Well,
you want to share?
I think we're definitely gonna have to meet in one of those months, probably September.
I would, yeah, I would hope we push it off till September, but,
We might as well reserve a day now.
yeah, if you want to reserve a day. So what day do we not want to go to? Fort Collins isn't that far away. Just on your
We
way.
have Catfin the last day in Saratoga last day
In August.
in August.
So we actually might benefit us to do it like September 1st.
But I think that's when we have cap. Isn't it? No, we're doing
It's
29.
30th and 31st.
First.
You can only stay in Saratoga so long.
Well, we can come here.
I mean.
Well,
you
that's-
wanna-
that's
I
up
mean,
close to the
you want, you want to try and set that up for the first? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
September 1? It's a Wednesday, September 1? What's that?
Mr. Chairman, I have a conflict. That's when the air service, select air.
Oh, select
is
air.
meeting And the
In Jackson.
airline rendezvous in Jackson.
I think I'm in
29th,
Jackson.
30th, and 31st.
Thanks for reminding me of that, because I think I'm supposed to be there.
So do we scrub September
So I
1?
think we scrub September 1. Eighth or ninth?
Mr. Chairman, just for the committees, and you were over the top of education for your July meeting. That's fine. I don't think you have any conflicts on this committee. Education is meeting on the 8th and the 9th. Agriculture is meeting on the 9th and the 10th. I don't know if there's any conflict with that.
I think so. And so I would just do it at 9.
Nice fun.
Do that. I did Thursday at 9. I'd do it Friday, but I can't keep you guys here past 9. Yeah, I think that'll, unless you want to,
Correct.
unless you want to, we can do it Casper here. I don't care. You'd rather just soon come here, Randy?
Casper's a nice town.
Yeah, it's hard to, this room is just such a great place to meet. It's just hard to.
Well, and we're gonna have the governor presenting.
Yeah.
September 9, is that fine?
September 9,
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne.
And so lastly, then, would that complete the slate until we get together in December?
Oh, of course not.
Not
Probably-
like.
We'll probably have one more before
Yeah,
we do
probably
that.
one more.
Don, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if you did want to schedule, flipping forward to October, I have 2 items to discuss. October 11th, the Joint Education Committee is proposing a joint meeting with you, half-day via Zoom. The purpose of that meeting is you have to recommend an ECA by statute. They have to review it with the consultants, and then you have to review it. And to avoid the travel or whatnot, they've proposed a half-day meeting on the 11th, virtual meeting, not an in-person meeting, to address that. And then if you did want to establish a October meeting anytime the week of the 25th, we'll have the Craig report prepared at that week, so we can kind of juggle that for you. The week of the 25th, given your prior meetings, 1 day is fine, or if you wanted a 2-day meeting.
So you'll have the Craig before we meet. If we met the morning of the 25th, the Craig would be in hand.
Mr. Chairman, we would typically release it that morning.
So I think that's great. And then that'll give us a chance to start to finalize, start to narrow down and finalize any, I think, expected bill drafts and things like that, stuff we've already worked on, plus give the final request for anything else we want, so that, and then I guess we work the rest of those when we get together in December, unless we had to decide otherwise. That's kind of the idea you've got, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, it's the 25th.
I don't know, you're making a face like that's a bad day, but 25th?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe it's on the calendar, but it was one of the items discussed before Management Council when all of the committees were slating their time. So anytime that week works for us, but I believe Management Council did include that as a potential date.
I don't have anything that week, so it doesn't matter to me. That we'll meet whenever the committee wants to meet that. I think so.
Is there preference
That
between-
Monday, the 25th? I kind of like Mondays because I can travel down on Sunday evening. I don't lose a day of work.
And how
Doesn't have to live there.
It'll be a half day Zoom.
That's just a half day Zoom. You can attend from home.
I know. I won't if you're not going to be, you're not going to schedule it. It's something we should.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the day, I don't know why we wouldn't pick with them that day if that's, unless we've got, people can't be there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Don, a reminder of what our December dates would be as well, please. As well as January, if known.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and actually these are on the calendar. So the December dates would be December 6th through the 17th.
Merry Christmas.
And January is tentatively January 10th through the 21st.
I remember why I didn't like Jason.
And when was the Zoom call with join in?
11th of October.
Did they talk about whether morning or afternoon or?
They did not, but if you have a preference, I'm sure we could influence that.
If listen to those guys, if we don't do it in the morning, I'll probably fall asleep in the afternoon.
Yeah, morning.
Morning.
We don't lose half a day.
Yeah.
That's Zoom.
That's by Zoom.
And we will summarize this, not only put it on the calendar, but we'll send an email out to you as well.
Thank you. What else are we missing? What else are we missing, Don?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we've addressed everything. I will work with the chairs on the agenda as we normally do for July. I believe at noon, we circulated the reimbursement forms. So we'd encourage you to submit those back to Karen if you haven't already.
All right, and okay, so thanks. Is there anything else, members? And then Dave, you were here, we're gonna create a working group, and then we'll just start, we'll put together a Zoom here pretty quick and just get to work on this. And I think mostly it's gonna be talking about, it's gonna be spitballing ideas and what ifs and what they look like, and so. And initially, but my thought is initially, when we have the working group meeting, I think that Bob and I were thinking that, that the first one is mostly kind of get information, kind of do that. And it's not to have a big meeting where everybody's there and everybody's throwing input. I think it's to kind of look and understand where we're at in greater detail and that. And then later when we start to fashion those problems, then I think we'll be inviting other people to zoom in and join. I think that's kind of what I envisioned.
Yeah, I'm kind of get organized, get a list of
Yeah.
who we want, what information we want.
And then we can work with them and figure out how many reps we're gonna have. I'm not interested in having 9 people show up. If Pat's there and representing his group, and then your idea was excellent about, finding somebody to represent the outliers. They can, or 1 or 2 more is it, but I just, if we get too many, it'll be like Ms. Ferris peace accords with.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Vector and Nixon, so anyway.
does it make sense to have someone from Fire B?
What's that? I
Does
couldn't
it make
hear you.
sense to have someone from Fire Plan B involved in those discussions?
Well, we will, when we get to having, we start to actually get serious about some recommendations. Right now, I think it's just the first meeting or two will just be to acquire information. And we'll provide that link to everybody on the committee. So anybody who wants to listen in can listen in. I think, talking to Bob, I think who did you pick? Who go to the short straws on your side?
Andy.
Andy?
Already. Gotten so deep into.
Thank you, sir. May I have another? That's right. That's right. I think on this side, it's going to be, I'm trying to prevail upon Senator Kinski and I to do that, but we'll see. We'll see. Davis.
I'll do that with Mr. Chairman.
He's reluctant. He's,
I just wanted to clarify with respect to my former fire chief Simmons' suggestion that we bring another group in to represent people who are not represented by Mr. Crank. I wasn't endorsing that idea.
no, but it's a good point. I mean, he wanted 9 people and we're not going to have 9 people at the table on this thing. I mean, once you get somebody who represents has parallel interests, I mean, you don't need to have.
Who's Representative Crank, or who has Mr. Crank been secured by? The IAFF?
I think so. I think he represents the group. They've formed a group and have that association. They've pulled together to hire him and pay his fee, but it's not it. And which also, Elizabeth, I think one of the things we have to have is when we do change, I think part of this there'll be a change in benefit. I think that's definitely going to be one of the things we look at, and we're going to need our poly. We're going to need some background on that to find out, as you heard the argument between the legal arguments between Bob and Pat about constitutionality and whether it's a property interest or not. We need to, there's a definitive answer. We at least like to know the ins and outs of that.
Certainly.
I'm pretty sure that we ran down that rabbit hole in
Yeah, I
2014.
think so. I think we did that back in 2014, so you may just have to dust it off and see if anything's changed. Exactly, you're exactly right. But and the vast majority of them were vested at that point in time. So let's just, since he raised it, let's not get caught with our unaware. Anything else? Before we find anything else? Good idea. Good idea. All right. Hey, thanks, everybody. We appreciate your time. Appreciate your attendance. Karen, thank you. Don, Polly, Elizabeth, thank you. Thank everybody else that's behind the scenes. Kevin, you guys are picking them up, putting them down. We appreciate your work.